27.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It is, of course, 3 minutes past 6, just about. The sun is up already. It's going to be a very hot one today. We're already getting told that people are asking to be not only given the day off, but to be given off the rest of the week. Because it's so lovely, actually nobody wants to do any work. Well, we want to do work here. This is day one of the new year in the revolution of common sense, because, of course, as you know, yesterday we celebrated 1 year of Morning Glory. Now we're into the second year, so welcome. And let's welcome a new listener, because we've got a new listener in the form of the former Prime Minister. I think he's Sir Tony Blair, isn't he? Yes, he is. He's attacked Sir Keir Starmer's net zero policies, one Sir against another. Maybe they could have a duel. Maybe they could actually get it on horseback and sort of have some kind of lancing scenario going on. But basically, net zero is doomed, according to Sir Tony Blair. He's told Starmer, get off your hobby horse, get off your high horse, and basically people are being asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle, which they know that their impact on global emissions is minimal. Well, we've been saying this for a long time, and I can only conclude that Tony Blair is obviously a big fan of the home of common sense, a big fan of this show, and a big fan of this station, because it's all we talk about. We talked about it yesterday. Net zero is an absolute and utter crock of nonsense, and the fact that Keir Starmer, Ed Miliband and the rest of that motley crew of people who are running this government have signed up to it, everybody knows it's rubbish, everybody knows it's not going to happen, everybody knows that it won't make any difference, not a jot of difference. I just heard somebody on the news saying 8 million homes are at risk of being flooded. Well, you know, you're also at risk of being hit by a meteorite, and you're also at risk of being run over by a bloke from a Deliveroo in a bicycle going at 40 miles an hour down a bus lane. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, I'm afraid. We've got lots to talk about this morning. Theo Usherwood's here. Theo, very good morning to you.
Very good morning to you, Mike.
We're going to talk about 2-tier Keir and 3 tiers of tariffs, because apparently over in the United States, the UK has been put on tier 3 when it comes to negotiations with Donald Trump about whether or not we're going to get a trade deal. So now you can see that he won't like a bit of his own medicine, because there is no doubt that 2-tier Keir likes a bit of a tear, doesn't he? Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves has found something else to tax. Yesterday it was milkshakes. Today Horses. She's gone, all right, what else what have I not taxed? Come on, hands up. Anything? Yeah, well, what about rabbits? No. Cats? Dogs? Anything? No. How about horses? Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Let's tax people that put bets on horses. We already do. Oh, never mind, we'll just put the tax up. Then we'll put it up from 15% to 21%. Unbelievable stuff. Pupils saying goodbye to recorders. So if you're a parent and you've gone through that particular hell of listening to your child trying to play a recorder, you know, I mean, we've probably got some kind of recording that we can play. It is absolutely awful, dreadful. Also, we're going to be talking about WhatsApp groups. According to a new study, it's very dangerous to get yourself involved in WhatsApp groups without knowing where the borderlines are and where the boundaries are, because you'll get in terrible trouble. And also, Brits are back on the beer in Spain after all of that nonsense with the blackout. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Yesterday, of course, we also celebrated, in addition to our first birthday, it was 100 days of Donald Trump. We'll continue with that because he was out on the Raz last night doing these same old Donald Trump tricks, bigging up himself and bigging up the administration of the USA and how they're going. But Theo Usherwood is here, first of all. Let's say very good morning. How are you doing, Theo?
Very good morning to you, Mike.
Beautiful day out there. Are you enjoying the sunshine?
I am enjoying the sunshine.
Daily Star are saying everybody now wants the day off, not just today, but basically for the rest of the week.
Yeah, rest of the week.
Rest of the week
bank
off.
Holiday Monday, work from home, however you want to.
Line the garden. You know, don't bother doing anything.
Drink rosé, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I was out, I'm happy to admit, yesterday afternoon over in Borough Market, a friend of mine and I had a sort of afternoon of imbibing, and it was lovely. It was really beautiful. People walking around in sort of summer clothes. You'd think you were in Benidorm or somewhere, you know, really nice.
It's great when when the sun's out, everybody feels better about themselves, don't they?
I think they really do. Great. I mean, the world does look like a much nicer place when the sun's shining, doesn't it?
Yeah, everybody enjoys it. And I was up in Scunthorpe,
were you?
radiant.
Wow.
Interviewing.
Were you talking about the steel scenario?
Well, it still didn't come up actually. I was doing something with Nigel Farage, an interview with Nigel Farage, and he was on great form.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's got good reason to be. I mean, there's stuff in the papers this morning saying that they're going to make a massive gain on Thursday. Thursday, of course, the big election day. We're not allowed to talk about it in absolute detail, but because of the regulations. But certainly there are pieces in the paper today, lots of polls saying Reform are going to do really, really well. Which, of course, again, I've been saying for ages.
Yes, and look, these are polls, so they're only suggestions about how people might vote. I get all the rules and regulations, Mike, don't worry. But it is looking like this is going to be a seismic shift. You know, if he wins, if Reform win the Runcorn and Helsby
by-election, which I think they will.
16th safest Labour seat in the country. Yeah. You're going to see Reform potentially running councils in places like Durham and in Doncaster, winning mayoralties as well. Yeah. It's going to be a big moment, and when the Labour MPs and the Conservative MPs come back after these local elections to Westminster, they're going to have to get their tails up, because this is going to be a moment. The only word of warning, of course, is these are the first elections where actually Nigel Farage is going into them, and it feels like, you know, Reform are going to come out and they're potentially going to run things. Yeah. So they're not going to be standing from the sidelines, chucking rotten tomatoes at the Tories. 40
and some
years
people think that is a big problem for them because they've never run anything. So let's see how they get on.
So they're going to be under the microscope in that way.
But the point I will say to people who make that argument and say, oh, you know, maybe they're going to get a taste of their own medicine, they're going to see, you know, are you seriously going to try and convince me that the people who are currently running things actually know what they're doing? You know, I give you Birmingham City Council, you know.
Exhibit 1.
Exhibit A. I give you any number of other councils. You pick one out of thin air. It was probably bankrupt. It's probably not doing the job that it was set up to do. It's probably struggling to cater with all the social care problems that they've got. They probably aren't emptying the bins in the way that people would like. You know, and also an awful lot of people are really annoyed that they're not even going to be able to vote in this election because their particular area, certainly in many parts of the north of England, many Labour areas are being sort of distributed and reorganised so they can't vote.
Yes, and Nigel Farage made that point a few months ago that he saw it as a bit of a stitch up the particular area, and also in places like East Anglia,
and
Sussex, where there'd been and the argument from Reform was, you know, these were particularly sensitive areas for not Sussex, but for Labour, where they don't want to suffer big losses.
Well, this is
so
the
they're
thing.
doing this
It looks a bit like that, doesn't it?
This reorganisation with with devolution.
And for those people, once it is reorganised, and I don't know what the timetable is, when will they be able to have a chance to vote for the people who actually they can vote for?
So they're looking to postpone the elections by a year, if I remember.
So it might be next year.
It'll be next year. They still have to have the elections. We haven't quite moved to Pyongyang.
Not yet. But not yet. But also a piece in the Mail today saying none of the above is the headline. Basically, disillusionment is driving this week's local elections, with voters lacking faith in any of the main party leaders, which also in the end will feed into reform. And I was hearing from somebody yesterday that I was talking to who said that an awful lot of Labour voters are so fed up with the Labour government, they won't, vote obviously for reform. They won't vote Tory, but they might just vote Green or something, or Lib Dem. So it could be a boost for those two parties as well.
Yeah, and I think across the board, Labour's going to get an absolute kicking.
Yeah, quite rightly deserved. Well done, Sir Keir Starmer.
Yeah, the important thing is if you're taking away votes from Labour, then the vote share of reform is inevitably going to go up, and we know how close they came in the general election.
Yes.
So many seats.
Yeah.
So I know people are saying, well, you can make an argument, Mike Graham, that if people are staying at home, that's not a good thing for reform. It depends which parties' voters are staying at home.
Totally.
And if Labour voters are staying at home, but Reform voters are still coming out, Labour is still going to get a bigger kicking.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think there are people. I mean, there was a great piece of video. I don't know if you saw it doing the rounds yesterday, of a Labour member, a Labour candidate rather. I think it was Runkle, knocking on some woman's door, who basically just slammed the door in their face and like, "I'm never voting for you." Yeah, Keir Starmer, what a scumbag, and all this. Very funny stuff, and a lot of that will be going on.
I saw one Labour MP implying on social media, that Reform voters are stupid. And I think that's really dangerous.
It's really a bad way to go, isn't it?
Bad look.
We've seen it before. We saw it with Brexit. We saw it with various other things that have happened in the past. Way to go. And it really is a bad way to go. And you can tell they're rattled by reform because Starmer keeps mentioning it. But let's talk about our brand new viewer, though, Sir Tony Blair, who's obviously finally decided that forget about everything else. Forget about the BBC. Forget about ITV. Forget about some of those other lesser crested organisations which produce media shows, and watch the home of common sense. Because net zero is doomed, it says on the front page of the Telegraph, and the front page of the Times as well. It says net zero doomed to fail. Even on the I newspaper, Blair blows a hole in net zero. He's speaking for the nation here, isn't he? And he's saying exactly what we've been saying, literally for years.
But it matters that he's saying it,
of
course, he is the ultimate Labour grandee. There is nobody.
He's the godfather of Keir Starmer's Labour, isn't he? Because Keir Starmer, even though he's not as clever as Tony Blair, and he's not as smart as Tony Blair, and probably not even as committed as Tony Blair, he is definitely the son of, or the godson of the Blair movement.
Starmerism would like to define its. Starmer would define Starmerism as something fundamentally different from what we saw in the noughties with Tony Blair, late 90s and noughties with Tony Blair. But this is, make no mistake, the centre left, those followers of Starmer, those people who have advocated for Starmer in a previous life, followed Tony Blair.
Yes.
So if Tony Blair is coming out and now saying, guys, this is a farce.
And he would always start the sentence with that, wouldn't he? Guys, come on, guys, come on.
I'm channeling my inner Tony Blair. I just can't wait for him to send you a voice note.
I know.
Tony in where is it? Tony in one of my many houses.
My favourite Tony Blairism is the one from the Good Friday Agreement, where he said, this is not the time for cliches, but I feel the hand of history on my shoulder. Brilliant.
But doomed to fail. This is what he thinks, and he goes on to say that the backlash against climate change policies threaten to derail the whole agenda.
Yes.
Labour, they're really unhappy, Mike.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm quoting a Labour source, Stephen Swiffer's story on the front page of the Times. Blair's intervention was a public tantrum and really unhelpful.
Right.
And they couldn't wait to point out that the Tony Blair Institute for global change hasn't got your show on tannoy around their offices. No, it won't be long. But they are being advised by the government of Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Apparently.
Well, no, they're saying they have advised the government.
Advised the government.
You might
of Saudi
argue
Arabia.
that's why Saudi Arabia have actually changed their tack, and why Saudi Arabia, of all countries in the world, actually have also talked about, a transition to green energy, but obviously not in the same way that we have, because he's basically saying that this whole business of net zero, phasing out fossil fuels in the short term, is doomed to fail, because inconvenient facts are that production and demand are actually rising. Yeah. And that's right, because production around the rest of the world is rising, and as people talk about, this is why I couldn't believe this ridiculous security energy security summit last week, where it was basically just a green net zero fest to bring a load of people to London, make it look as if we're all together with the EU, and all, look, here's Ursula, so nice to see you, Ursula von der Leyen, let's bring you into Downing Street, let's put a hand on your shoulder and hold your hands and all that. And it was all a fake kind of show of solidarity over net zero, which of course Trump is against, and he is having a massive effect on the rest of the world. They're going to drill, baby, drill. The Saudis and the countries in the Middle East are still going to continue drilling for oil, even though and British Petroleum, or Beyond Petroleum, is now called BP, have reversed their position on it. So really, the Europeans are swimming against the tide here, and the people of the European countries don't want to know about it.
And you saw the power outage across the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, Portugal, Andorra. There are going to be serious questions now about the reliance,
of course,
and energy security.
And isn't it funny how they tried to blame it on some weird catastrophic weather event, and nobody bought that, so then they just went very quiet, because it's clearly to do with the resilience or otherwise of a net zero electricity grid, which is not very resilient.
No, and we know that it doesn't have the, if you follow this agenda and you're relying on onshore wind farms, you're relying on solar energy. You're
relying on basically unreliable sources. What is at the end of the day. That's what it is, and so you can't do that.
Don't call them renewables. Call them unreliable.
It's like building a house. It's like building a house made of cardboard.
And that's why ultimately, are China worried about this? Are India worried about this? Are Brazil worried about this? These are the economies. We've got to face facts. We're in a global race. We're in an absolute. These countries want not just our breakfast, they want our lunch, our dinner.
And they're all running that way, and we're sort of running against them and getting beaten to the punch every single time.
1% we contribute 1% of global emissions. The total increase, the total increase in China's emissions is greater than the entirety of the UK's emissions.
Well, somebody mentioned yesterday at the end of the show, the voice note of the day rang in, there was a big fire and the substation blew up. There's massive black plumes of smoke blowing out of it. And he said, I wonder whether this is within the ULEZ zone, because obviously the Card will probably want to try and tax it, which is absolutely true. But it's certainly bad news for the Clean Air Brigade. Suddenly you have a fire, we have a volcano somewhere in the world, and you can wipe out any kind of gains you think you might have made by telling people not to drive down a particular street in a low traffic neighbourhood. Forget about it.
It's full of birds. And you could almost be in favour of net zero if the Chinese were doing the same. If the Indians were doing the same.
If anybody could prove that, one of my mantras is, if you can tell me how much better off we're going to be, either financially or health-wise or anything, I'll be more than happy to go along with you. But nobody can.
But we're paying, your listeners, Mike, are paying the price. So it's worth, you're paying the price in terms of higher energy bills, you're paying the price in terms of levies that are going to be placed on your energy bills in order to hit this target. And this is at a time when your listeners, your viewers, sitting at home are tough economic times, right? People are having to make hard choices, and they don't get a choice about those levies which they are seeing on their energy bills dropping on their doormats or landing in their inboxes. They just have to pay those levies, and they have to pay for the energy. You can't just switch off, stop using energy. You need to cook. You need to put lights on.
Well, as you say, look at what happened in Spain and Portugal. Suddenly the whole economy, and we'll move on to this in a bit, people are now asking questions about whether it's a good idea to have this cashless economy that everybody's going on on about, because what happens when the ATM machine doesn't work? What happens when your contactless machine doesn't work in a shop? You can't pay for anything. You can't buy anything. You can't get access to your money. So people are now saying to me, just sort of anecdotally, I think I'm going to keep some cash. Even if I stick it in a drawer with the socks or I stick it under the bed, I'm going to keep some cash in case this happens here. And people are legitimately concerned about that.
And you rely so much on your mobile phone as well, just to go about your life. And everybody has everything on their mobile phone. You can do your shopping on your mobile phone. You have a power outage like that, mate. You're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to, after a day or so, 2 days, you're not going to be able to charge your mobile phone.
No. Exactly right. Lots to talk about this morning. Theo Rushford is here. Net zero, the first of it. No shock from Steve's point of view on the latest poll. He says none of the above would win every election if it was on the ballot paper. Yeah, I wonder if we should put it on the ballot paper, actually. And another Steve says, Blair and his mate Brown did untold long-term damage to Britain, but even he can see the stupidity of Milibandit's loony net zero crusade. But will Starmer swallow his usual arrogant, stubborn pride and admit it's wrong? It'll be a huge electoral boost. Well, you see, that's the thing. If he did do that, if he could unleash himself from the sort of the capture that he's in from various green groups and from various sort of believers in climate change, he would be a massive winner, because he would actually probably solidify his voting base. People would love to vote for a guy who actually held up his hand and said, you know what, I don't actually believe any of this cobblers, because it is actually cobblers and I can't prove any of it. One from Andy in Notts, who says, morning Mike, and good morning Sir Tony, you are clearly watching. Whilst you are telling Starmer how wrong his government is, why don't you also suggest he and his entire cabinet resign? I've been through one winter of discontent. I don't fancy doing a summer of the same. And that is also supposedly coming our way.
Starmer, there seems to be a recognition in number 10, and you've seen the softening of some of the policies. They're building a third runway at Heathrow Airport. That's going to mean higher admissions. You've also seen there was going to be a ban on hybrid cars being sold beyond 2030. That's now been relaxed and more time's been given. So very slowly, the penny is starting to drop. Whether it drops in time, I'm not sure that's going to happen. We've got the local elections, and then I think when you're looking ahead to the reshuffle, and there's going to be a reshuffle later this year, if Ed Miliband keeps his job, then that is a signal that Keir Starmer's full steam ahead with net zero. Excuse the pun.
People tell me he's worried about Miliband's sort of left-wing supporters inside the Labour Party. He doesn't want to get rid of him.
The soft left, they're called.
Yeah. He doesn't want to get rid of him because he brings a lot of the left support with him.
Yeah, and the Green vote is you mentioned there about the Labour vote fragmenting, and you mentioned many Labour voters they may not go to reform, but we've also got left-wing voters over issues like Gaza, going to the Greens. Green issues very important, the environment very important to them, and also going to the Liberal Democrats as well. So there's a fragmentation that Keir Starmer is aware of, and you can lose so many of those voters, but you can't lose them right across the board, because then you're left with nobody voting for
well,
you.
exactly.
They're the base.
And that's his problem. We got loads of clips of Donald Trump last night. It was at a rally in Michigan. Let's have a look at how he dealt with a heckling protester first up, and then we'll play a load more of them.
He did so great. What's the problem over there? What's the problem? Is that a radical left lunatic? He's just a child. All right, get him out. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, ma'am. I thought it was a guy. Thank you. And she now has to go home to a mother who's a big Trump fan. Her mother's watching. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I said he, and it's a she. I'm sorry.
He's back in campaign mode already. And of course, he's not going to run again, is he? I mean, maybe he is. He's not supposed to be running again, but there's already talk that he might try and change the rules so that he can.
Well, I think they're looking at changing the rules where J.D. Vance would run again, and they talk about you can't be elected for a third term. But J.D. Vance would go for go for his first term, as it with Donald Trump on the vice presidential as the vice presidential ticket.
VP.
And then the rules, if you interpret that, you switch over, and he hasn't been elected.
Can you imagine?
He's just.
Can you imagine how
JD
mad that would drive people? That would be absolutely brilliant. Be fantastic. Theo Rushford's here. It's 24 minutes past 6. We've got loads more to do. Keep your voice notes coming. Keep your tweets coming in your texts as well. 87222 for those. This is Morning Glory.
Exactly, and the worry is that standards are already or will in the future be diminished as a result of a kind of equalities drive to get more women into the Marines. Now, as you said, at the moment, no woman has ever made it into that elite, into the kind of the top level, what they call getting the Green Beret, becoming a Royal Marine Commando. But many are now trying, and there are women in the sort of lower ranks of the Marines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 6:26 is the time. Good morning, Mike, says Stephen. He says, Steve from Middlesbrough here. On Blair and net zero, if Starmer did come out and change his mind, could you trust him? He'll say anything to get elected, as we have found out. No, I think I can say with absolute surety, I would never trust Keir Starmer on anything. But if he, beside Tony Blair, decides that actually that Tony Blair advice is the right thing to do, I'd be all for it, and I'd certainly cheer him on to do it. But that's the trusting. I mean, do you trust any politician? Certainly not. Let's look at Donald Trump again. He did an interview with ABC, which is one of the big networks in America. One of the big networks, in fact, that he's been very critical of because they were amongst many media commentators who were weeping their eyes out when Trump actually won the election. Here he is talking about trust with Vladimir Putin.
You think Vladimir Putin wants peace?
I think he does, yes. I think he does. I think because
even with the raining missiles
I think he really, his dream was to take over the whole country. I think because of me, he's not going to do that.
Do you trust him? Do you trust him?
I don't trust you. I don't trust a lot of people. I don't trust you. Look at you. You come in all shooting for bear. You're so happy to do the interview.
I am
And
happy.
then you start hitting me with fake questions. You start telling me that a guy whose hand is covered with a tattoo doesn't have the tattoo. You know.
All right.
I mean, you're being dishonest.
No, I'm not.
Let me
No,
just
I am
tell
not,
you,
sir.
I don't trust a lot of people. But I do think this. I think that let's say he respects me. And I believe because of me, he's not going to take over the whole. But his decision, his choice would be to take over all of Ukraine. Okay. It's a war that never should have happened.
I mean, you can't argue with that, can you?
Yeah.
And he gives it to the guy, quite rightly, because, you know, some of the media coverage of Donald Trump is so ridiculous that if I was him, I'd be saying exactly the same thing. And I more or less said it. Well, I don't trust any politician. Why would I? I don't even trust Donald Trump because, you know, he's now a politician.
The reporter, I love the way that Trump suddenly started taking aim at the reporter and the way that he said, "You're so pleased to get the interview."
Yeah.
I think shooting the bear that you got the interview. Is that the right? Did I hear that?
I think that's what he meant. Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course the reporter turns around and starts laughing and tries to laugh it off. But Trump doesn't think, oh, ha, 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 joke. Let's just stop there. He just carries on and hits him again. And then he's like,
And again,
like,
you know, people are horrified because they go, "That's not how you're supposed to do it." No? Yeah, well, that's the way he does it. And he's right to call these people out because, you know, this is a guy, and the reference he was making there to the guy with the tattoo on his face or on his hand or whatever, would be one of those Venezuelan gangsters. And the media, the left-wing media in America, have been desperately trying to point out that, oh, they're deporting the wrong people. They're deporting all these people who should be allowed to stay in America. And Trump's going, why? You know, they're criminals, they're gangsters, you know, they're bad people. Kick them out. And he's got a big tattoo that shows you that he's that guy.
Yeah, and Trump has, you know, Trump was adamant that he's good to his word. I think what I think is really interesting about Trumpism, and people I think have overlooked in this country, is that what people are really fed up with politicians is they're not good to their word. They make a lot of promises.
And they talk in riddles and platitudes, and they don't make any sense. Trump talks like an ordinary person.
Yeah, and then they get into office, and then they go, oh, it's too complicated, or we can't do this, or we can't do that. And what I think is so fascinating with Trump is that he got elected with an agenda, and then what he cares about is delivering on that agenda. So as soon as he gets into office, he just has people, his team, lining up executive orders for him to sign to deliver that agenda. And I know we run a parliamentary system in this country and everything, you know, most things have to be put for a vote for legislation. But I just think it's like, I think it's just politicians in this country would do well to look at what Trump has done in terms of tapping into the American mindset.
But also it's about communication as well, Theo. It's about how he speaks, and people really put a lot of sort of importance on this. Nigel Farage is successful in this country because he speaks like an ordinary individual. He doesn't, you know, if I ask you, you know, what day is it today? You don't go, well, you know, the important thing is I've been very clear about, you know, knowing what day it is, and I've always said to you, Theo, that I know what day it is, and so do you. But instead of just saying, you know, actually it's Wednesday, and that's what Trump does, and that's what Farage does. And the rest of them, they just don't know how to do that.
I noticed, I mean, when I spoke to Farage yesterday, you get a different type of interview. It feels like you're speaking to a human being,
and you're kind of going, oh, he's actually answered the question. Well, I'll have to have another question, because you're expecting them to all obfuscate and kind of, you know, dance around the issue and run around the back of the house and, you know, come back with another, you know. But he doesn't.
And he makes a point, and he might begin the sentence differently, or begin the opening to the question, or his answer to the question differently. But he does make a point of coming back and saying, "I'm going to answer the question." And I don't think he does that for my benefit. He didn't do that for my benefit. He doesn't do that for the interviewer's benefit. He does that for whoever's going to hear the interview at home. Because what they get really frustrated about, I imagine everybody listening to this show would get really frustrated about, is when they listen to a politician and they're not stupid. They can tell the politician hasn't answered the question. They can tell the politician is not delivering.
And to be honest, you know, when I've had Kemi Badenoch in the studio, she does the same thing. She doesn't get the credit for it, but actually she is a much more straightforward, you know, speaking politician than most people. But let's have another look at Trump with this guy from ABC, because I think you're going to enjoy this one. This is on Biden's decline.
Do you think the reputation of the United States has gone down under your presidency?
No, I think it's gone way up, and I think we're a respected country again. We were laughed at all over the world. We had a president that couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, couldn't walk down a flight of stairs, couldn't walk across the stage without falling. We had a president that was grossly incompetent. You knew it, I knew it, and everybody knew it, but you guys didn't want to write it because you're fake news.
All right. Thank you.
And by the way, ABC is one of the worst, I have to be honest with you.
He's right. Because they didn't say it, they didn't report it. They all pretended that Biden was fine, you know, when he clearly wasn't.
And just on this standing thing, the questions, you know, has America's standing gone up or down in your presidency? I'd make the point that Keir Starmer walked into the Oval Office with a letter from the King to give
letters from the King. Sorry, I always do that whenever you mention it. In fact, if I got one, here it is. I'll try and do it better. Here we go. You go like this.
Here you go.
Pocket like that.
Go on then. Okay.
There you go.
So Keir Starmer walked into the Oval Office with a letter from the King.
I've got a letter from the King.
Here we go.
Do I have to open it? You know, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
But
anyway,
I almost lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
But the point is that he walked into the Oval Office with the letter from the King to give to Donald Trump. Because that wouldn't have happened for Joe Biden.
No.
This was unprecedented. It's a second state visit bestowed on Donald Trump. Most political leaders don't get one state visit. So if you look at the evidence that is before your eyes, Donald Trump standing in the view of the British government, has gone up.
And again, he answers the question quite rightly to this guy who was part of the cabal of silence about Joe Biden, where he says to him, because he's got an agenda, do you think you've wrecked the reputation of the United States of America? And he says no, because Joe Biden already did that.
Yeah.
And he's right.
And it was
because
and it was
we were.
ignored.
I mean, we used to weekly on whether it was Plank of the Week or whatever show it was we were doing. And sometimes daily we would play the sort of the Joe Biden overnight clip of him forgetting where he was, or not being able to walk off the stage, not remembering his lines, falling down literally on a stage. I mean,
standing
just
around
ridiculous.
looking in the air,
and everybody went, oh, but we've tested him and his cognitive abilities are absolutely fine. We could all see it.
It was worse than that.
We could see that this guy was unfortunately, too old, suffering from, at the very least, the early stages of onset dementia, and yet he was still being supported and kind of allowed to supposedly run the country.
It was worse than that. I mean, media journalists who actually turned around and said, look, this is like yourself, who actually said, well, this is a problem, and this man clearly hasn't got full ability of all his faculties.
Yeah.
They were castigated as being spreading misinformation.
Yeah, right.
And
being ageist.
Yeah,
or something. Absolutely incredible. Anyway, listen, we'll come back to Trump. We've got even more clips from him there. We're going to talk about Gen Z when we come back. We're also going to talk about Rachel Reeves. She's now going after horses. She's going to tax those. And also people saying goodbye to recorders. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:37. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Theo Usselwood is here. 3 cheers for Donald Trump, says Margaret in Birmingham. Strong, charismatic and entertaining. Send him a common sense bumper sticker. He'd probably put one on his car, actually. He's the sort of guy that would do that. And David says, Blair isn't saying this for no reason. He'll be trying to gain trust to push the digital ID. That's a bit of a leap. I mean, he's talking about net zero. He's not talking about digital IDs. I know he does go on about that, but I think he's flat out saying, and some people have sort of interpreted his statement about net zero as a kind of shot across the bows to Starmer to say, look, if you really want to stay in power and in position as leader of the Labour Party, maybe ditch Ed Miliband. I think that's the secret message, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's always an issue. This is a sort of theme we're seeing, particularly in left-wing politics, where they want to say that up is down and down is up, We've seen it with the trans debate, where
and that's another one that's got a story this morning. It's in the Express, I think, has got it on the front page, where some ex-judge, former Judge Victoria McLeod, who's a transgender judge, by the way, has been described as a moron for plotting to overturn the Supreme Court's landmark decision from a couple of weeks ago. She's poised to apply to the European Court of Human Rights, claiming the judgment violated her civil liberties. And guess who's supporting her? The British Medical Association,
which has described the decision as scientific illiterate, which kind of goes to the heart of the problem, right? The British Medical Association. I know it's called the British Medical Association, but it's the trade union.
It's the trade union of the Marxist junior doctors.
Right. Let's not beat about the bush. They've got a cuddly name, but it's not a cuddly organisation.
Yeah.
Right? And they've come out, and if your ideology is so deeply ingrained that as a medical professional you can say that a man can be a woman, then I'm sorry, you've lost.
I'm not coming to you for a packet of pills, I'm afraid, if you can't tell what a woman is.
That's what they said, and you can I despair, because I can see her using the ECHR, which of course allows people to stay in this country under Article 8 because they can't, because they're alcoholics.
But I mean, it could be a fascinating scenario.
I could see them winning.
Well, yeah, but wouldn't it be interesting though? Because then you could see Keir Starmer, who has previously accepted the Supreme Court's decision, actually refusing to accept the ECHR decision because we can. We don't have to take what they say as anything other than a guide. It doesn't have to be gospel. It doesn't have to be the truth.
But we already saw, didn't we? We saw in his own cabinet the pushback in those WhatsApp messages.
Of course.
When the
Angela Regal and all that.
Yeah, when the equalities watchdog turned around and said, right, we need to issue new guidance because we're clearly not. The guidance at the moment clearly isn't in lockstep with what the highest court in the land says. Yeah. And people describe the interview as appalling.
Right. But Starmer has locked himself in now because, having said that the Supreme Court has provided clarity, he can't very well then go.
He can follow the legal judgment, right? He can sway like a weather vane.
But he'll look even more ridiculous if he then goes with the ECHR judgment if it's different. Let's have a look at what he was saying yesterday on one of my favourite subjects, NHS waiting lists.
Come this way, sir.
We said we'd do 2 million extra appointments on the waiting list in the first year of the Labour government. We've done 3 million now, which is really brilliant. Nice to see you all. The prescription charge was supposed to go up, but we've now just frozen it today. The second thing that we're announcing today is the NHS app. Because we've really pushed that hard, we've saved 1.5 million appointments which would have been missed. A strong view on health services has been underfunded and underappreciated for the last decade, and we can turn that around.
I do regular comes with my children to the minor injury.
I understand. How old are your children?
16 and 14 now.
That's exactly the same age as mine.
Exactly the same age as mine. Why has he got his sleeves rolled up?
Why in hospital?
Well, why? Why is that what you're supposed to do? So when you walk into hospital, you're supposed to roll your sleeves up.
Yeah.
Because it's cleaner. And there he is, of course, being completely and utterly disingenuous, i.e. lying again, about all the things that are being done to change the NHS. Have a listen to this from Simon.
I received a text and an email probably a month or so ago advising me of an upcoming appointment I had that I'd been referred to. Now, I was at the doctor's in January with some issue with my feet, and I presumed it was to do with that, because there was no detail at all. It just says, you have an appointment at this time, come along, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I went along, and the nurse said to me, yeah, this is in relation to you was referred to us in December 2023 because you had a rash on your face. Now, yes, I did have a rash on my face in 2023. It was just some allergic reaction to some cream that I'd taken. And that was the end of it. It had obviously gone after a couple of weeks, and there you go. So I'm now sat in front of two health officials, whatever you want to call them, 18 months later to discuss something that was a rash. And I felt really sorry for them, because it's not their fault, it's the people who's booking the appointments. I said, but, you're running through this backlog with people like me who would have a problem with a rash on their face 18 months later that's now taken up a slot which somebody could have taken who had, probably something a lot more serious, which wouldn't be difficult. And they were just shaking their head in disbelief, honestly.
I mean, the stories that I've heard this week alone, just from people calling in. We had a guy yesterday call in to say that basically his wife was taken into hospital and had needed some kind of MRI scan. They're due to go on holiday the next day. Because it was the weekend, she couldn't get the MRI scan, and it was now 3-4 days later, yesterday, and she still hadn't had the MRI scan because they couldn't give her an MRI scan because it wasn't an emergency, and they're going, but she can't leave and she can't go on holiday until she's had it. And as far as I know, she's still sitting there waiting for it, and he's going, we just want to go on holiday. We don't know what the MRI scan's for because they won't tell us, but apparently it's not an emergency, and so they won't do it. And you're going to go and you're sort of trapped in this crazy dystopian Kafkaesque hell where you just want to go on holiday.
Yeah, it's...
And then he's there rolling his sleeves up, telling everybody how great the NHS app is. I mean, what a moron.
My wife...
Also, why have they got AC/DC playing the soundtrack to this one? You know, they've obviously been listening, moved away from the soft porn 1970s type music, and they've now gone for a bit more kind of Metallica, you know, AC/DC, a bit of heavy metal.
My wife had a text message, an NHS text message alert for an appointment at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's like,
what, the appointment was at 5 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, the appointment was 5 o'clock in the morning.
Jeez.
I spent half the day trying to ring somebody up to check that the appointment really wasn't at 5 o'clock in the morning, which you couldn't do.
Let's have a quick chat about Rachel Reeves. She's decided to put some taxes on horses. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is considering a betting tax rise on horse racing, placing the struggling racetrack industry at fresh risk of ruin. Yeah, well done, Rach. They already charge 15%, apparently, on betting tax. They now want to raise it to 21%. I mean, is there no end to the avarice of these bleeding politicians?
They need more money.
Yeah,
and they need to find more money because they're going. It's looking like, and it's looking like the front page of the Guardian. We mentioned it before that we're in the third tier for this trade deal with the United States. We're going to hit, and then of course, they want to blame Trump, but let's face it.
Well, I was saying yesterday, she came back from Washington DC. We have not heard a peep out of her about anything that happened there. Why? Because nothing did happen. She got nothing from them.
And this is, these are jobs that are on the line now in the automotive industry, potentially in the pharmaceutical industry as well. Highly skilled jobs that are in real peril because, of course, their one job is to get an exemption on those. The government's one job,
and they haven't got it yet.
They haven't got it.
No,
and it looks like they're not going to get it.
Right,
and that's going to be a huge problem because you're going to see jobs go. You're going to see jobs go.
And it tells you that, does it not? I would say that Peter Mandelson's role as Washington DC representative and ambassador for the UK, he's not cutting any ice whatsoever inside of the White House.
But we knew that was going to be the case. We knew that
Trump won't get on with him.
And Karen Pierce, who was the ambassador, actually had a very good reputation.
Yeah.
She'd worked wonders to actually get inside, get in there with Team Trump.
And knowing Trump as we do, you'd be better off with a woman, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. And she'd actually secured that gig, the dinner for David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, and Keir Starmer, despite David Lammy having been so rude about Trump back last year. And it just seems... Yeah, if you want to, I understand. Politics, there's patronage, right? But that is not. Keir Starmer's always promised to act in the best interests of the British people, and putting in somebody who clearly is not suited for this particular role,
for this administration.
No, look at what Mark Zuckerberg did with Trump. When Trump came in, who went? Nick Clegg. Because Nick Clegg and Donald Trump are not going to get along. So you need to get somebody running your public affairs and presenting your company who is going to be able to get in there with Trump and
say all the right things.
And say all the right things.
It's common sense, isn't it?
Yeah. And we saw what happened with Bezos. Bezos backed down.
Yeah. Well, this is what we've done. There's an Amazon story today. We'll talk about that in a minute. 6:47. Theo Usherwood is here. Do bring us more of your messages. This from Sean. He says, I've been in hospitals many times over the last few years before my mother passed away. I never once rolled my sleeves up, and I was never asked to. Says Sean from Bridlington rather. Morning, Mike. It's okay for two-tier, no idea to go on about the NHS app, but it doesn't work in Scotland, says David Aberdeen. Why not? How can you have an app that doesn't work in Scotland? Well, is there something special about Scotland? By the way, front page of The Sun this morning, a big advert for Mull in Scotland where it says Wills and Kate on Love Island. They've gone for their 14th wedding anniversary, looking more in love than ever. The fun pack trip saw them help with DIY and trying whiskey and haggis in Tobermory, which is a lovely part of the world. A lot of minchies up there, though. But apparently you can't get the NHS app. What's going on in Scotland? Why can't you get it? What else can't you get in Scotland? 6:48.
I tried to explain to my friends across the pond that, you know, when everybody else in Europe gets a slap with 20% and you get 10%, maybe you should be grateful for actually getting a better grade in class than everybody else. And it's the beginning of negotiations.
But hold on a minute, we don't have the same tariffs as the EU.
I'm not going to reveal the number of where you are in the queue or in the line, but
Are we in the top 10? Are we in the
worry.
top 10?
I think that's a pretty good guess.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:51. Theo Usherwood's here with us. We're looking at all stories in the morning papers. Jacqueline says this. Don't forget, Mike, that Starmer came back from the USA and said Biden was top-notch and on the ball, which, of course, he did. Yeah. This was, I think, shortly before he got elected, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When he went and saw Joe Biden and was full of the joys of spring about how, you know, absolutely on the ball he was and how, you know, he didn't miss a trick and he knew exactly what was going on. And once again, another complete and utter misdirected piece of information. Margaret in Yorkshire says the reason that lady cannot get the MRI scan she needs is because all the staff are taken out from working to stand and listen to Mr. Starmer saying how many appointments they're doing. Let them do their work and not stand around. It's a very good point. The NHS will be featuring, I'm sure, in this show for the rest of time because every single story that we hear is even more mind-boggling than the last. Let's have a look at a couple of other stories, though. Shopping over cash. This is a sort of a hangover from what happened in Spain and Portugal at the weekend. Over the last 24, 48 hours. Everything's returned back to normal. But large parts of the country are without any power whatsoever for 24 hours. And a lot of people saying if it happened here, we'd all be in trouble because we wouldn't be able to get any money out. We wouldn't be able to pay for anything or even, you know, charge our electric cars. And a lot of people saying, isn't it time to go back to using cash for a lot of things? Because so many shops now don't even accept cash.
I can't remember the last time I had a £10 note in my pocket.
Really?
I
mean, I generally carry cash with me all the time.
All the time?
Not much, not loads, but, you know, 100 quid or so, just in case, you know, something happens. I mean, I've walked into various places on occasion where they've gone, the systems are all down, we can only take cash today. You know? It's happened to me quite a lot in the last few weeks.
And you valued having cash with you all the time.
Absolutely. Because if you don't have it, you can't pay for anything. And if for example, all the lights went out and you suddenly went, I've got to get from point A to point B. No trains, I can't do it. I have to get a taxi maybe. You know, you need money.
I keep a little bit at home.
Yeah.
What I do is I take out cash and then I forget where I've put it.
Right.
And then I'm opening a bag or I'm going...
and you suddenly find a couple of 20s,
A couple of 20s, it's great.
Yeah.
It feels like... Yeah, so it's, but that's... I
think it's sensible, but if there was to be a sort of a massive power outage that lasted for more than, say, 3 or 4 days, you wouldn't be able to do anything.
No, and what this report has found is that actually a number of shops now simply aren't allowing you to pay with cash.
Yes.
And what I've also seen it. I've also seen it in supermarkets. So you have the automated tills.
Yeah.
And they don't. The majority of them don't allow you to pay with cash. There's little slots where you could put the money in.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Cards only.
Yeah.
And then you have one store where they sell the cigarettes, which allow you to pay with cash.
Right.
But that's it.
Right.
So we are moving.
It's like parking places now. You know, if you go to a car park and they've got a machine, generally speaking, they don't take cash anymore either.
No,
even though they used to take like pound coins or whatever, they don't.
But I know, you know, my elderly relatives, they still use cash. They still pay for everything in cash. They like to go. They like to go out. They leave the house to do the shopping. They go to the cash machine. They get their cash out, and then they go and do the shopping.
Yeah.
And that helps them to budget. Because you can only you've got 100 quid, which is, and then you can spend the money.
Yeah.
You can't go over. Yeah, I mean, it's not a good. It's being reliant on one thing is never.
Well, exactly right, because if you are in a situation where you can't access anything because of the electricity not being there, then you're stuck, basically. So I would advise anyone who doesn't like using cash to at least keep some knocking around, even if, like you keep it in the house. Now, recorders. I don't know whether you ever played a recorder when you were a boy back in the day. I don't think I did. I played a violin when I was young, and so I used to play in the school sort of orchestra, and I was quite good. I wasn't bad, yeah.
Do you still? If I gave you a violin now,
I could probably get something out of it, but I sort of stopped. I remember for my 21st birthday party, we had a band. And we put a band together and somebody put an electric pickup on it, and I played it like sort of the guy that used to play with Jackson Brown, and it was pretty good actually.
I didn't notice you're a man of many talents.
Yeah, but I haven't really played it for probably 25, 30 years, so it's incredible. It would take a bit. But have a listen to this, because this might bring back memories for you.
Playing the recorder has almost halved in a decade, from 28% in 2014 down to 16% today. Instead, schools are using the ukulele or guitar for whole class.
That sounds insane.
Lessons.
I mean, because apart from anything else, it's a lot more expensive. If you've got to buy a guitar for your kids or a ukulele,
30 guitars.
Yeah, I mean, also if your child is practicing with a ukulele at home, that's awful, isn't it? Apart from the fact that it's Ed Miliband's musical instrument of choice, you know. Don't fancy that at all.
But the point I think the story makes, of course, is that the recorder can be taught en masse.
Yes.
You can have 30 children in a classroom
sounding just like that.
Sounding just like that. Hell.
I mean, the thing that people say to me, though, mostly, is that an awful lot of state schools in particular don't even have music lessons anymore. You know, we had a music teacher at my school, both primary and secondary, but apparently music teachers are in very short supply, and a lot of schools can't afford to have them, so they just don't.
And that's a real pity, because music's so important.
It really is.
It's it
gives a lot of kids. It's a great leveler for kids, because it doesn't matter how well off you are, doesn't matter how well dressed you are, you know, it doesn't matter how poor you are or rich. If you can play a musical instrument, it's, you know, you've got something to talk about, you know.
And it's something that you can use at your 21st birthday. You know, it's something you can carry with you wherever you go.
If you know, and if all goes wrong here, I can just go busking down outside London Bridge Station. Finally, WhatsApp groups. This is a new one. Apparently, there's warnings now being issued for WhatsApp groups, so that you have to be told, be careful what you say in WhatsApp groups. I mean, I would always be careful what I write down. Anyway, and there's been occasions where we've got a few here. I don't use them very many of them, but we've got a WhatsApp group for the show. We've got various different WhatsApp groups, and you know, you think about writing something and you go, actually, no, I'm not going to put that. I'm not going to write that down.
My rule of thumb is don't write something in a WhatsApp group. In fact, I don't have conversations with anybody on WhatsApp that I wouldn't be prepared to work related.
Yes.
I wouldn't be prepared to see strung up on a billboard in Leicester Square.
Yes.
If I'm not prepared if I'm not prepared to see it, Theo Usherwood says blah 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 on a billboard in Piccadilly Circus or Leicester Square, I ain't saying it.
That bloke's a right wally, and you just wouldn't do it.
And I just say, and
common sense again.
Common sense, and I just ask people, should we have a coffee or should we have lunch or whatever it is? Do you know what I mean? And I do it like that.
I think
that's. But you know, you can see people, you know, I guess...
But people are just stupid nowadays, aren't they? They write things down and go, I didn't know I was going to get in trouble for that. And you go, well, you should have realised that you would have got in trouble for that, you complete idiot. And then some other idiot will go, well, it's not freedom of speech, is it? No, never mind. Anyway, Theo, listen, good to see you. We'll be back with loads more coming up in the next hour. We're going to find out what you think about the elections coming up. And also, Donald Trump, more from him. This is Morning Glory. See you after the news. Talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it a channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour Ghost Train.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 7. The sun is up, ladies and gentlemen. What a great week of weather so far. I know it's only Wednesday, but we have had, I kid you not, the most fantastic heat wave in London over the course of the last couple of days. I was out in it yesterday afternoon, having a lovely time, met up with a good friend of mine. We sort of chatted over the various different important issues of the day. A couple of glasses of rosé, very, very pleasant way to be spending a Tuesday afternoon. This afternoon I'll be working, unfortunately, so I won't be able to do that. However, never mind, Joanna Bell's coming up. We'll be asking her about whether she can play the recorder. The recorder apparently is off the menu at school. Pupils are saying toodaloo, it says on the front page of the Times, to basically playing one of the most popular recording devices of all time. Have a listen. I mean, it's an absolute every parent's nightmare. You can hear that coming from the bedroom upstairs. You're going, oh, for God's sake. You're going to go to the school concert and listen to it as well. Absolutely horrendous. Listen, Christian, the producer, my producer's come up with a great idea. If you fancy playing a bit of recorder music, by all means, put it in a voice note, send it to us, and we'll show it to the world. This from Denny, who says, thank God they've done away with the recorder. It used to drive my family mad, practising London's Burning. The scale of this could go off the scale. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's one of those stories that everybody can get into. And, of course, in this day and age when things are not going terribly well, it's good to have a bit of a laugh this morning. So we'll have a laugh about recorders. Maybe you're some kind of recorder fantasist. You want to play the recorder, you're just not very good at it. The big news this morning, though, Tony Blair, Saint Tony of Blair, has come out and said the thing that we've been saying for years and years and years. He's obviously a secret listener to this show. Net zero is doomed to fail, he says on the front page of the Times. Front page of the Daily Telegraph says net zero is doomed as well, and Blair blows a hole in net zero. The I newspaper, basically, he says the former Prime Minister says voters are being asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle that will have minimal effect on global emissions. You're not kidding, are you? I mean, I've been saying this literally since the year dot. Ever since I've ever been on the radio and on TV, I've said there is no point in trying to hit the net zero targets, because when you do, nobody can explain what happens then. what you can say is that no matter what the target is, no matter if you achieve the target, it will make pretty much zero difference, never mind net zero difference, zero difference to what will actually happen around the planet. 0344 499 1000 is the number. A lot of people getting very concerned after the blackouts in Spain and Portugal that we are living in a cashless society, which will mean if the same thing happens here, thanks to Ed Miliband and his crazy net zero policies, when we have a blackout, nobody will be able to get access to their money, which is absolutely horrendous. Also, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has now decided that she might want to tax horses. Brilliant. 0344 499 1000. What next? A tax on llamas? This is Morning Glory. We'll be back very shortly. Now, you might remember a few weeks ago, Prince Charles, now known as King Charles, was caught playing a vegetable. It's not a recorder, but it sounds a bit like one. Have a look at this. I mean, that's a carrot, I think he's playing there. It doesn't sound any better than a recorder, does it? That, I believe, is the British Vegetable Orchestra or something similar. So many places now haven't got a single bank left, and small traders and shops have nowhere to pay cash in if they do take it, says Steve. I think that's a good point. Lynn says, I can't pay cash into my bank because of annual cash limits at the post office. There's no branch for me to pay it in. Well, this is a problem, isn't it? If you can't put cash in a bank, you just have to hoard it at home in a sock or something, don't you? Or keep it in a drawer, like Theo said he did. Joanna from Salisbury. Mike, finally they see the error of a cashless society. Even our local Primark started off no cash, found they were losing money and introduced cash, so you can actually now pay. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I basically got a load of cash having won a couple of, shall we say, horse races, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to spend it anywhere. And actually, it's been easier than I thought. A lot of places, though, will not take it, and that, I think, is wrong. 7 minutes past 7, let's say good morning to Joanna Bell. Joanna, how are you, dear?
Good morning, Mike. Lovely day today. It
is a lovely day, isn't it? Are you any good on the recorder? Haven't got one lying around there, have you?
I did play back in the day, but I was very bad, and like most people, I tortured my parents. I used to do Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yes.
And it was absolutely horrendous, but I was interested to hear that you play the violin.
Yes. Well,
I thought you'd be more of a trumpet player.
No, definitely not. No brass for me, I'm afraid. Very much a strings man. But yeah, I mean, I think I've still got it somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I think it's in the loft or something.
I would like to hear. I think you should bring it out on the show one day.
Yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I'll do a bit of practicing and then play a little jig at some point coming up to Christmas.
But
or something.
it's good that they've banned it, because I think that they should be teaching kids how to drive and pay their tax and useful things that might be useful for them when they're adults, rather than this recorder, which I don't know why they picked that over other instruments. It's probably because it's cheap.
Well, it's cheap. Yeah, everybody can buy. I mean, I think the school used to give you the recorder, and you'd have to give them, I don't know, 2 or 3 quid for it or something like that, or maybe you'd have to give it back. But yeah, I'm not going to mourn the death of the recorder, that's for sure. Let's talk about Tony Blair though, because he's obviously a secret listener to this show. Net zero is doomed, he says. He basically says it won't make any difference no matter what we do. This is bad news for Starmer, isn't it?
It's really, really bad news. I mean, I think in the next 10 years, they had projected they would be spending 341 billion on net zero.
Yeah.
But 2/3 of the carbon emissions come from developing countries. So I don't know if you've ever been to, I know China and India, but if you've ever been to Africa, like, they burn their rubbish there.
Yeah.
So there's really no point in us doing anything.
And they also chuck it all in the river, don't they?
They have no infrastructure there, so everything that we do is really like putting your finger in the Hoover Dam to try and plug it up. It's like there's no way we can do it unless the best thing Britain can do is find technology that can bury carbon emissions, which is something that they're trying to develop now, apparently.
Well, the problem, of course, with carbon emissions is that, I mean, as somebody pointed out to me yesterday, and if you saw that big fire in London yesterday, somewhere near St John's Wood, around Edgware Road area, huge plumes of black smoke funneling up into the sky, flames everywhere, hundreds of firefighters, and as somebody pointed out to me, I wonder if that's in the ULEZ zone, because Sadiq Khan might need to think about taxing it, you know. But really, you know, when you think about volcanoes that go up, when you think about those kinds of fires, when you think about, you know, brush fires, forest fires, wildfires around the world, California, you know, I mean, the amount of pollution that goes into the sky and goes into the system is way over and above anything that anybody does driving around in a petrol car.
Well, exactly. And then you've got the jet fuel. It's, you know, we're going to be taking apparently 20 times more flights than we take now. So really, you know, there's really, I don't want to say there's no point, because we should look after the environment. And I think climate change is real. I'm not sure if you agree.
Well, I don't dispute the fact that the climate might be changing, but I do dispute the fact that it's got anything to do with us. I mean, that's all I say. I mean, I don't know if anybody can prove that anything that we're doing is making any difference at all, one way or the other.
Exactly. Well, I was in Kiev a few years ago, and the whole city was enveloped with smog from the factory. You couldn't even see the sun. It's like you really can't curtail other people's carbon emissions, and that's going to affect us long term.
Exactly right.
Well, all these little towns are being flooded, and people are trying to put in flood defenses, and really there's no point. They need to move to higher ground, because their houses are built on floodplains.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's you know, people say, oh, but you know, everything's changing. The coast is eroding. Well, the coast has been eroding since the beginning of time, and the reason, as you say, why quite a lot of flooding happens now is because of the way that the land is managed, because of where people build houses, and why they sort of channel the ways they channel the river. But you know, I'm interested as well in how this affects the government, because according to one Labour source in the Times, they're saying that Blair's intervention here is a public tantrum and really, really unhelpful. And they're claiming that one of the reasons why they think that he's doing it is because the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change is currently advising the government of Saudi Arabia. Well, I mean, I don't care about all of that, but what I do care about is does this give Keir Starmer an opportunity maybe to ditch Ed Miliband?
Oh, I hope so. I
hope so.
I really, really hope so. We've seen all the blackouts in Europe from them going completely net zero, if that is the cause. And, you know, it's obviously that's a bad omen. I think, you know, he can't even eat a sandwich, let alone organise net zero. So, you know, I thought he was gone. I can't believe he's back in the cabinet.
I know,
it's ridiculous.
It is absolutely ridiculous.
We thought we'd washed our hands of this clown, and he's still there. Can't shake him off.
I know, absolutely shocking. Big story in the Sun today, pages 8 and 9. Reform tips for big gains in the elections coming up on Thursday. Basically, people are sick to death of the Tories, sick to death of Labour, and it looks as though not just that Reform will do well, but the Greens will probably benefit, the Lib Dems will probably benefit as well. But the polls are showing the Reform leading at 26%.
Well, it's absolutely insane. I think people are just scrabbling around now for the great white hope, and they think it's in Reform. But, you know, I hate to be pessimistic, Mike, and I know Nigel Farage is... you're a big champion of Nigel Farage and
Not particularly.
Reform.
No, I think he talks straight, unlike most politicians, and I think that's what a lot of people like about him.
Well, that's it. He does talk straight, but when he gets there, is it going to be more of the same? I fear it will be more of the same, and he'll, you know, renege on all the policies that he's put forward, and it's just, you know, I really don't have that much hope.
Well, I mean, a lot of this is about local elections, and a lot of it is about local councils, and I think that's where you build political movements from, I suppose. And what I say to anyone who's just said what you said is that, do you really think that we're being run very well at the moment? The answer is no, we're not.
Well, exactly. But, I mean, I feel like if Nigel Farage is the best that Britain has to offer, then God help us, you know?
Well,
I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
I'm not going to ask you who you'd prefer, but, you know, the big question, of course, and the big win for them will be if they manage to win the Runcorn by-election, which is also happening on Thursday, and that will be a massive blow to Starmer, I think.
Oh, I think they will win. Yeah, I think they're going to make some big gains. You know, the polls are all in their favour, so, you know, we'll see what happens, and maybe they will make change. I mean, you got to give them the opportunity to do what they said that they were going to do, and like you said, it takes it from the grassroots to make change. So
yeah,
hopefully they'll do that.
Well, true. And I mean, one thing he is very sure about is the policy that Reform would have on immigration, because backbenchers, according to a piece in the Telegraph today, on the Labour side have turned on the Prime Minister, and they're calling on him to think about leaving the ECHR, because basically everybody now knows that immigration is a massive problem in this world.
Well, it's huge, and you've got the judge, but the judges are in cahoots. They're all making money. It's a big racket. You know, the lawyers are making money off the asylum seekers. It needs reform, you know, but we don't have to take what the ECHR says. It's just a recommendation, right?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, what is one of
we
those...
can ignore them. You know, it'd be really funny, actually, if
just ignore them.
Yeah, again, that's something I've been saying for ages. You know, you don't have to make a big deal of it. You don't have to throw a hissy fit. You don't have to leave. You just say, we're just not going to do it. That's what all the other European countries do.
Exactly, and that's what they did. Somebody was being allowed to stay in the country because they couldn't get chicken nuggets in their own country. And I think that was overruled. You know, they still deported them. As far as
I don't know if they did, actually. I thought they stayed. I thought they ended up staying because
there was a child.
It was a child who didn't like the idea of Albanian chicken nuggets. I mean, I can't say I blame him, really.
Neither do I, but you know, like I said, these judges are really what's standing in the way of this is what's causing the boats.
Yeah,
they're actually destroying Britain.
Yeah, they are, because everybody knows if you can get here, if you get your feet on the ground, if you land at Dover and get taken in by Border Force, you will never have to leave.
Well, exactly. And, you know, somebody said something very funny. He's like, if you are British and you want a house, go to France, come over on a boat, throw your ID into the sea, and you'll get a house and, you know, money, and you'll be set up for the next 5 years.
And you can bring every single member of your family as well. Absolutely shocking state of affairs. Joanna, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Joanna Bell, political journalist and not a recorder player. Got this from Lisa in Birmingham. I played London's Burning and Three Blind Mice. In frustration, I threw the recorder and broke the glass in my mum's cabinet. And Sonia says, I loved the recorder. I was so bad, my teacher, Mr. Russell, just let me play 3 notes so I wouldn't feel left out, while my friend Jane got to play the whole song in a carol concert. I was only 9. There's a lot of childhood trauma going on here with the old recorder business. Let's get a voice note from Gary.
Morning, Mike. It's Gary from Canterbury. About your cashless society, I think there's a lot of shops going the opposite way now, because what's happening is that people don't want to pay the tax man and don't want to show how much they're earning, and there's loads of shops and everything going up in Canterbury going, you know, that although we take card, cash is preferred, or even just saying cash only. And it's a problem, because there's a couple of places I went into and I didn't have any cash on me, and so I couldn't buy what I needed. But that's the way it's going, because people don't want to hand it over to old Rachel from accounts.
Yeah.
Anyway, have a good day.
Interesting point, Gary. Yeah, I've noticed quite a few more cabs, actually, black cabs taking cash. Because, again, you know, people are so used to, I mean, particularly Gen Zers, right? They were so used to just doing everything on an app. Get an Uber, you know, pay for your food on an app. Get it from Uber Eats, get it from Just Eat, get it from Deliveroo. You know, you can't and shouldn't do everything electronically, because if the whole business collapses around you and there's a massive, you know, burnout, blackout, and you can't actually access any of your apps, you can't access your phone, you can't access any electricity at all, then, you know, what are you going to do? You're not going to be able to buy anything. You're not going to be able to eat. You're not going to be able to go anywhere, and you're not going to be able to put petrol in your car. So I would suggest that everybody should keep a little bit of cash somewhere in the house. We want to hear from you on this one, 0344 499 1000. And how about cyber attacks, right? Elizabeth says this, Marks and Spencer's cyber attack still not resolved, been going on for over a week. I just had my online order, which I made before the attack happened, cancelled. Front page of the Daily Mail this morning has got notorious hackers are behind the M&S cyber raid. The giant retail giant calls in Scotland Yard as finger is pointed at gang that blackmails firms for millions. And it's a shadowy group operating under the name Scattered Spider, who apparently was said to be behind the attack, which has crippled Marks and Spencer's for more than a week. I know people that went in to try and buy things last week in Marks and Spencer's and couldn't get them, and still can't. You still can't get online, you can't order anything. You know, the business, the way things are going, is going to be completely destroyed. 7:19.
14,000 majority just last July was what the Mike Ainsbury managed to get, and that has certainly been overturned, and it looks like it will be enough, and Reform are running ahead. It's hard to tell with polls on the local level, small numbers of course, but it does look like they're going to take that. And also the Doncaster mayoral election, 10,000 votes majority 4 years ago for the Labour candidate, and it's looking again like Reform are on track to take that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory 7:22. I'm Mike Graham, and this, of course, is the home of common sense. We're going to talk to Victoria Atkins, MP, Shadow Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. This one from from Debs, I should say. Morning, Mike. Is that Sir Keith charming Rachel from Accounts on the recorder that we just heard? Debs from Lincolnshire. Well, I don't know about that, but apparently a big story this morning on the front page of the Times, no less. The Thunderer basically says that the days of the recorder are now over. People say toodaloo to playing the recorder. A survey reveals the number of children playing it has almost halved in a decade, from 28% down to 16% today. Terrible indictment, that, isn't it? Got this one from Cliff. He says, I remember recorder snobbery. He said, posh kids had wooden ones. Mine was plastic from Woolworths. Victoria Atkins is here, MP and Shadow Secretary of State for the Environment, of course. Victoria, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Did you ever play the recorder?
Good morning. I did, and I have to say, I thought the plastic ones were the posh ones. I wanted a plastic one because I thought it sounded a bit better than the old-fashioned hand-me-down that I'd got from my family. Yeah, so, you know, I'm very sorry to hear that.
I am.
Probably good for parents.
It is, but it is
practice.
Yeah, I mean, it is every parent's nightmare, isn't it, when you hear the old recorder being played in the upstairs bedroom and you're thinking, oh, my God. Anyway, listen, let's turn to important matters. We've got net zero being slammed this morning by Tony Blair, somebody who's obviously been listening to this show, because I've been saying this for a long time. I mean, you guys have had your own sort of dalliance with net zero. It seems as though Kemi Badenoch's slightly taking you further away from it. But what do you make of what Tony Blair said?
Well, as you say, Kemi gave a speech, I think a couple of months ago now, where she challenged the orthodoxy about reaching net zero by 2050. Look, we would love, of course, we all want a cleaner environment. We want our air to be cleaner. We want to preserve and conserve our countryside for future generations. But we have to do this in a way that is realistic. And that was the message that Kemi put forward in her speech. At the time, she got a lot of criticism from the left. But isn't it interesting now that Tony Blair, former Prime Minister, we know a close confidant of the Prime Minister today, it's interesting that he has come out and supported this line of thinking. So, you know, Kemi and the Conservatives have led on this discussion recently, and we will wait to see whether the Prime Minister and Ed Miliband wake up to what Kemi has been saying, you have been saying, Mike, and now Tony Blair.
Yeah, because it has put an inordinate cost onto a lot of businesses, an inordinate cost onto an awful lot of people's, you know, just ordinary finances. You know, our electricity bills are higher than everybody else's in the world because of net zero. You know, many of our costs of living are put up by net zero kind of, you know, demands that are being made on us. And I just think it's pretty unfair. And this ridiculous idea that we're supposed to all replace our gas boilers with heat pumps and all that sort of thing is just for the birds, isn't it?
It is, and being a very proud rural MP as well, living in the countryside, representing, of course, on the national stage the agriculture and rural communities, we know how tough it can be in rural communities in particular. I have an oil tank at home. Many people, we just don't have the public transport available to us that perhaps you have in the centre of the city, and so we have said all along, this net zero aim, we have to take people with us. And what is so worrying is that whilst Tony Blair has dared to question this following Kemi Badenoch, now, of course, in my own county of Lincolnshire, but across the country, we are seeing planning applications going in for miles and miles of solar panels being plonked on prime agricultural land that should be producing food, particularly when we have such a volatile world as we do at the moment. They should be producing food, but instead Ed Miliband wants to plaster solar panels, wind farms and pylons across our country. And this, people are beginning to really become very, very worried, but also quite angry about this. And so this is why we as Conservatives have said, look, we need to look at this again. We need to rethink this. We need to find ways of ensuring, as I say, that we protect and conserve our environment, but that we do so in a way that you and I can afford.
Yes. And speaking of protecting the environment, the government are talking about bringing a new law in to punish fly tippers, which is a blight across the countryside and across our environmental landscape. This is, I don't know if it's a good idea, but they're talking about deploying drones and mobile CCTV cameras to identify vehicles so they can be seized. Do you think that'll work?
Well, this is a desperate ploy by Labour the day before local elections to try and distract from the nightmare rubbish mountain that is growing under a Labour-controlled council in Birmingham. I'll take three of the measures that they've announced today. The first being drones. These have been in use since 2021. The announcement today is merely repeating what is already happening. No new funding. It is a rubbish announcement about rubbish. The second announcement about seizing fly tippers' cars. We agree, so much so that the law for this was passed 35 years ago, and so we've said to Labour, not only should you be seizing these cars, but you should also be putting points on people's licences, because of course sometimes, sadly, organised crime gangs steal the cars in which they use to transport this rubbish. And then the third measure, which you have to laugh because otherwise you'd cry about government policy, they've announced that they intend to increase the sentence for persistent fly tippers up to 5 years. Well, we agree with that. We agreed with it so much. In fact, it's our policy. We brought it before the House of Commons last month as an amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill, and guess what? Labour voted against it. So suddenly they've seen the light and they're adopting Conservative policy. But what they don't want you to know is that the top 10 worst councils for fly tipping are all Labour controlled. Indeed, in the top 50 worst councils, 72% of them are Labour controlled. And they don't want you to know this because we introduce these league tables, which gives us, the public, the transparency to know that the Secretary of State's own council has the worst fly tipping number of incidents in the country. We wanted the transparency in order to encourage particularly Labour-run councils that have 3 times the rate of fly tipping of Conservative councils. We wanted that transparency to try to hold them to account. Labour are stopping those league tables because the facts are embarrassing to them. And then we look at Birmingham, and the good residents of Birmingham must be looking at this announcement in disbelief, because whilst he talks about not wanting to see waste accumulate, when's he been to Birmingham to try and clear up the mess there? And so this, I'm afraid, is a really desperate attempt to introduce national policy in the local elections ahead of tomorrow, and the message from us is vote Labour, get rubbish.
Yeah, and I mean, I wonder why it is that nobody has sorted out the Birmingham situation. I mean, I wonder whether the fact that so many members of the Cabinet are members of Unite the Union, and so many members of the Cabinet have been in receipt of money from Unite the Union, that may have something to do with it.
I'm afraid that is the only conclusion that can be drawn, because the mess and the rats that people are having to live with. The Health Secretary himself said that this rubbish was a threat to public health. Well, why aren't they getting a grip? And rather than being on the media round today as City Steve will be, why isn't he getting his rubber gloves on, going to Birmingham and help clear up the mess that a Labour-run council has created? And what is even more frightening is that we see the mess in Birmingham, and we know that Angela Rayner is trying to make it easier for trade unions to call strikes. So I genuinely think we are on the verge of a summer of discontent, because if they get their way, which they will, because they have a supermajority, if they get their way, then we're going to see this summer of discontent with more and more strikes, not just with bin collections, but across the board. We'll see more strikes, and it will be the public that suffers from these strikes and these trade union masters making sure that their government does what they're told by their union paymasters.
Yeah. One final one. Local elections coming up tomorrow, of course. According to a poll that's been done just recently from More in Common, the best and most likely result for most voters is none of the above. You know, I mean, that's how disenchanted and disenfranchised so many people are.
Yeah. Look, I came into politics. I spent 15 years prosecuting criminals in the criminal courts. Unlike Keir Starmer, I actually did prosecute them. I wasn't a pen pusher and a civil servant like Keir.
It's a good question. You know, can I just ask you about
politics.
that? Yeah, can I just ask you about that? Because people say to me, if Keir Starmer was such a great lawyer and such a great barrister, why is he so useless at public speaking? Because as a lawyer and a barrister and somebody who walks the, treads the floorboards in court, you've got to be pretty good at that sort of thing.
I mean, you're making me blush, Mike. But the truth is, he never spoke to a jury. So I cut my teeth at the Old Bailey, at Southwark Crown Court, and indeed courts around the country, up in Manchester and elsewhere, prosecuting drug gangs, prosecuting fraudsters who we were getting them rather like Al Capone. We couldn't get them on the drugs and the guns, so we'd get them on the money. Right. And so those sorts of cases, you speak to a jury, you have to be able to explain really complex cases and frauds in a way that everybody can understand. And Keir Starmer was a very senior civil servant. I don't take that away from him, but he wasn't a criminal barrister. And I find it very, very frustrating when I hear him say, "Oh, I used to prosecute." Yes, he did, because he was the person behind the desk instructing people like me to do the hard work in court. But I'm being I've allowed myself, forgive me, I've been a bit naughty and run away, because actually one of the things I think that the public don't like is when politicians are asked questions and they don't answer them. What I'm trying to do is to say to you, look, I came into politics from that background. I came in because I saw young people in particular caught up in terrible criminal gangs, and I wanted to try to do something. You could see various points in their life where, had they been able to take a different turning, then they may well have been steered away from a life of crime. And that's why I came into politics. I genuinely wanted to try and help be a force for good. And I think at the moment in politics, I'm really conscious there's huge disenfranchisement with politics. It has not been helped, frankly, by this Labour government. I would say they have a lot to answer for, because they made promises before the election which they have just completely broken from, not raising taxes through to the family farm tax on family farms. Steve Reid, the secretary, the DEFRA secretary, said to farmers before the election it was, I quote, desperate nonsense and a lie to suggest they'd raise a family farm tax, and yet that's exactly what they did in the emergency budget. And it is these broken promises that are so disappointing and angering people. What we're trying to do as Conservatives under Kemi is take a fresh look across policy areas, including, for example, net zero, and trying to be straight. When something is not working or consensus has got it wrong, saying, look, we think this is wrong, and we're going to find solutions to this. And we're doing that because we are trying to rebuild trust with the public, with the Conservative Party, but also, I think, importantly, with our democracy, because we need only look across to Ukraine and Russia to see how precious democracy is. And I would encourage, please, everybody who has a vote tomorrow to please go out and use it. I hope you will feel able to vote for the Conservatives, because actually If you vote Conservative, you get lower taxes, you get better public services. But it's really important that we cherish and nurture our democracy, because I don't want your viewers to feel so disenfranchised with politics. That's a really, I think, a really, sorry situation that all politicians have to take responsibility for and try and improve.
Victoria, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Victoria Atkins, MP, Shadow Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Steve Breed's doing the rounds this morning on the Labour Party's behalf. I don't think he's coming on our show, though, once again. Never mind. City Steve, as he's known. Waste criminals and fly tippers who blight our towns and villages have long gone unpunished for too long, he says. That ends today. The government is calling time on fly tipping. I will not stand by, he says, while this avalanche of rubbish buries our communities. This government will seize and crush fly tippers' vans to clean up Britain's streets. OK, then. Here's Adrian on the NHS.
Hi, Mike. Good morning. Wonderful show as always. Adrian from Heathfield. I know you're always interested in NHS stories, so here's one which has just come off the news network from a reputable source. Apparently, the NHS Muslim network are now promoting Islam across all the staff. They're being funded by the NHS, given time and resources to go out and to produce guides to try to encourage NHS staff to convert to Islam. I'm all for religious freedom, but I don't think we should be pushing religion in public services like the NHS.
No, I mean, I've just come in to get my foot fixed, thanks. I'm not really looking to convert my religion. I think that's mad, isn't it? Apparently, the NHS Muslim network is all over the NHS, getting public money, indeed, £2,655 of public money in 22-23. So you can imagine there's probably a lot more now from the Department for Health and Social Care to help people convert to Islam. According to a document I've got here in front of me, it says, don't feel rushed into a decision to become a Muslim, but while I can guarantee it will be the best decision you've ever made. We will help you with the journey as you navigate a lot of new information and become comfortable in your faith. Can you just fix my foot, please? You know, it's still hurting. Yeah, I know I've got an appointment coming up, but, you know, you just cancelled it. Do you know what I mean? You know, can you just get the priorities right, please? Ben Habib's coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:39. Andy from Notts says, I also have a significant amount of cash in the safe. Recently, when the supermarket Sainsbury's, in my case, had a computer outage and they couldn't take any electronic payment, I was straight to the front of the queue. I don't trust computers. I don't trust banks when I do use plastic. I think a lot of people are starting to feel that way. Helen says, morning, Mike. My husband, at the age of 83, had a heart bypass in February, and in March he was admitted to A&E on a Friday afternoon with pneumonia. He spent the weekend in A&E because there were no beds. With no washing facilities facilities, no proper food, just sandwiches. I brought him home on the Monday evening at 7 p.m. How is this NHS getting any better? Well, we'll play a video later, a clip of Keir Starmer making out that everything's getting better because he's got his sleeves rolled up and he says they've now got an app, as if that's going to change anything. Let's talk to Ben Habib, former Deputy Leader at Reform UK, setting up, of course, his own party now. Ben, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, here we are, once again, discussing the nightmare of immigration in this country. We've just been advised by a caller who left us a voice note that the NHS is not only now not treating people because they can't, but they're actually encouraging them to convert to Islam. And they've got some public money to help them along the way. It seems incredible what's going on in this country. Meanwhile, more than 10,000 people have come over on the small boats already this year, the biggest number ever. And we're finding out that in our jails, basically, there are Muslim gangs sort of pushing violence, drugs, their own propaganda, converting people in there. I mean, what's happening?
Well, the country would appear to be falling apart, Mike, I think is the only way to describe it. And I mean, there's been some remarkable revelations of what's been going on in our own judiciary when it comes to the smuggling of people across the Channel. You know, judges, members of who are members of charities that are actually giving legal advice to illegal migrants on how to circumnavigate the European Convention of Human Rights, and in our case, the Human Rights Act, and how to get settled in the United Kingdom, even though they've entered the country illegally. These are our judges sitting on these charities, and it's an extraordinary testament, I think, to the state of the United Kingdom, where we have a judiciary that is effectively pro the trade of illegal migrants.
It really is extraordinary, isn't it, how much has changed in the past sort of 5 years? Because even 5 years ago, it was Boris Johnson who was promising to limit the amount of immigration coming into the country to 20,000. And that was before we even counted the legal migrants who were coming in. But, you know, we heard over the weekend that, of course, now councils up and down the country are hoping and praying that landlords, private landlords, will give them some property so that they can house illegal migrants, move them out of the hotels and give them actual houses.
Well, I mean, they're going to be given 5-year leases from Serco, effectively government-backed, inducing landlords to become part of the problem. You know, because if you're a landlord and you can effectively get government-backed income for 5 years, you're going to love the illegal migrant trade, aren't you? Because it's going to give you security of income. And you create vested interests in the United Kingdom, which are against the United Kingdom's interests. By doing that kind of thing. But I just want to go back to what these judges have been up to. This charity, Refugee Legal Support, which was set up in Greece, apparently, and then spread right across Europe, and now has representation in the United Kingdom, and has members of British judiciary on it, is effectively aiding and abetting the smuggling of illegal migrants. And Keir Starmer promised he would smash the gangs, and yet we have the judiciary as members of charities that are aiding and abetting the criminal activity. And of course, we're all aware of the RNLI, which goes out into the Channel, sometimes into French waters, picks up people from dinghies, puts them on their boats and brings them back to the United Kingdom. That too can only be described as aiding and abetting an illegal activity. So when he talks about smashing the gangs, the point at which he needs to start is our own judiciary, our own charitable services in the United Kingdom, which are aiding and abetting this activity, and RNLI included. You know, there's no point trying to cooperate with the wretched French, who we know are not going to be doing a damn thing to help the United Kingdom if we don't get our own act together in the United Kingdom. There's so much that needs to be done. And of course, the most obvious thing when it comes to stopping people from crossing the Channel is that we need a proper trained force in the Channel with appropriate equipment, fast boats, drones, sensors, barricades, whatever it takes to intercept these, identify these dinghies on their journey, intercept them, and make sure they don't enter British territorial waters in the first place. The Channel used to be a moat for the UK. It used to protect us. And through the European Convention of Human Rights, and frankly, an antipathy by those who govern us towards us and to our own country, we have allowed the channel to become our Achilles heel.
Yeah.
And it should be protecting us. It's an absolute travesty what's going on.
Well, it's become a bridge, hasn't it, more than it's a moat. I mean, that's what's really happening, because all you have to do, and the French, and I think we have footage of this happening just a few weeks ago, the French authorities are not only advising the migrants what to do, they're sort of telling them, don't worry, if you head off in that direction, you know, within an hour or so, you'll get picked up by one of the boats from the RNLI or Border Force, and they'll take you to Britain. You know, they're actually telling them that. Because that's exactly what's happening. And you're quite right to say that, you know, most people in this country, even the Labour government, have worked out that it's actually a bad idea. You know, you've got Labour backbenchers now calling on the Prime Minister to actually leave the ECHR and not pay any attention to those people and to get on with safeguarding our borders. I mean, Starmer keeps making these wild claims and ridiculous statements about how, you know, he's making our borders more secure, and he's building up our defences, he's spending more money on defence. Meanwhile, you know, people are literally pouring in 10 to the dozen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no point militarily preparing ourselves to defend a Russian invasion when we're effectively being assaulted by people entering our country in droves illegally.
Yes.
And the notion that they don't present a threat to civil society because they're coming from France, they're unarmed, is absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
We know nothing about these people, many of whom I'm absolutely certain hold us in contempt and would wish to assault our civil society. But of course, let's not forget, it was Keir Starmer in 2003 when he was a barrister. I heard you just talking to Victoria Atkins about Starmer's previous career, but before he became head of the Department of Public Prosecutions, he was a barrister, and in 2003 he was the one that afforded illegal migrants the right to claim benefits in the UK. He won that case. What a massive pull that gave the illegal migrants to come to the UK. And now they're using Article 3 of the ECHR, which assures them protection against being physically abused, effectively as an argument to have access to the NHS, because that is their entitlement.
I know.
This is how far we have fallen. Now, just moving on slightly, one really interesting development. Yesterday, Kemi Badenoch declared that the Conservative Party would detain and deport all illegal migrants. In other words, Kemi Badenoch came out yesterday in favour of the mass deportation of illegal migrants. This makes her, frankly, the most radical policy put forward. Her policy is the most radical policy put forward by any of the political parties, the main political parties. But the other thing to take away from Kemi Badenoch's declaration is that she must know you can't detain and deport all illegal migrants unless we also leave the ECHR, unless we also remove the Human Rights Act, which embodies the ECHR in our domestic law. So even though Kemi Badenoch has shied away until now from saying that we must leave the European Convention of Human Rights, it's very interesting to see the head of the Conservative Party now in favour of mass deportations and in favour of leaving the ECHR. This is a very positive development.
Well, it is, and let's hope that they actually get on with it and get going with it, because it's the only way to start making this whole nightmare finish for us. Thank you very much indeed, Ben Habib. Good to talk to you, Ben. There making perfect common sense. Coming up, we're going to talk to Esther McVeigh. We'll get more common sense from her. She used to be of course, the Minister for Common Sense. Let's get a voice note from Judith.
Hello, it's Judy from Altops, West Yorkshire. My sister, my younger sister, played the recorder at school, and she used to bring it home, and all she could play while London's burning all day and all night. My mother says, if I hear London's burning once more, I won't be held responsible for what I do. She was quite good at it, though, really, when I think back. Thank you.
Judy's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, London's Burning seems to be the most popular tune you can play on the recorder. We've, of course, got some recommendations of our own, which we'll bring you. Coming up, we're going to talk about cashless society and why shops are now apparently going to possibly be forced to accept cash and not turn you away as if you're some kind of brigand or some kind of, you know, appalling person who's only got cash. 7:49.
Britain got to the target, the rest of the world probably wouldn't, well, we would have destroyed our industry. The rest of the world would be profiting at our expense, and we would have sacrificed ourselves for nothing. I mean, that's what the government policy is leading to at the moment. But Tony Blair, as quite rightly said, it's doomed to failure. He's effectively said government policy, and, you know, he's a former Labour Prime Minister. He said the current Labour Prime Minister's policy is doomed to failure.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I mean, it just brings a joy to your face, doesn't it? The bad recorder playing, absolutely ridiculous. How about this from Sean? He says this, morning Mike, all this about fly tipping, how about just opening the tips and not based on appointments and charges? Bloody common sense. Well, it is the home of common sense, and the same goes for Keith, who says, Keith in Blackpool, stop charging people at recycling centres, simple, and then they'll stop fly tipping. Will they though? I don't know. Let's get a voice note from Lisa on cash.
I always use a taxi when I come back from Luton Airport to Milton Keynes. And they always say when I call up, is it cash? And if it is, I can get one. And if I've got to order it through the app, then it's hours to wait for. So I can get a taxi driver to Luton Airport in about 10 minutes if it's cash.
Interesting, yeah. I think a lot more people are starting to take cash now. Let's talk to Harrison Griffiths, International Programmes Manager at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Harrison, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. Good to talk to you. I've noticed, I don't know whether you have recently, that cash is becoming a bit more likely to be asked for. And if you have got cash, people are more willing to take it now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the public transport example is a really good one, you know, with taxis as well. People kind of making more flexible service for what to them is simpler payments. And I think that's a good thing. You know, open choice, flexibility, and neutrality, cards, cash, whatever it is.
Because one of the things that we saw in that blackout situation over in Spain and Portugal was that, you know, the economy was effectively paralysed for the best part of 24 hours because nobody could get any money out. Some people I guess they must have had some ATM machines that were working. Nobody could get any money out of the system. Nobody could put money into the system. Shops couldn't operate. You know, all of the contactless payment systems went down. And so we're kind of exposed in that way in this country as well, aren't we?
Well, a little bit, but blackouts are incredibly rare. And if they become a common thing, then we've got much bigger problems than cash or card. Although I must say, I always do keep a couple of spare notes around just in case such a thing happens, because it's always useful to have it on you.
Right. I mean, Age UK, one of the charities in this country, has actually said that older people are feeling kind of hard done by in many cases, because a lot of those older people who want to park a car somewhere or they want to, you know, go shopping, they haven't got an app, they don't want an app, they don't know how to use an app. They might not even have a mobile phone, and they're sort of unable to pay for an awful lot of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly a concern, and where there's genuine risk of financial exclusion, we certainly don't want to see that. But if the government wants to help people who genuinely cannot kind of adapt to new technological banking systems, card payments, etc., best way to do that is to offer targeted support, not to interfere with the market, not to tell businesses what to take and what not to take, because that imposes genuine costs across the economy, and you know that those are borne by all of us in the form of higher prices, lost jobs, and lower output.
That's the point, isn't it? And as far as the sort of the nature of cash, I mean, it was definitely a very big push a few years ago to try and turn us into a cashless society. Do you think that's sort of been forgotten about now?
A little bit. I mean, there was, you know, just for obvious reasons, the COVID pandemic and the lockdown policies accelerated the uptake of cards and kind of disincline people towards cash. But to be honest, Mike, it was a trend that was already going very far downhill. I think cash payments were already at about 28% of all transactions by 2018, down from something close to 60% in 2012. So this is something that has largely happened organically, albeit the lockdown policies did certainly accelerate it to some extent. But it has plateaued since then. People are still using cash, and as we've already discussed here, like businesses are still taking them, sometimes prefer them.
Yeah, well, nowadays as well, because of all the taxes that Rachel Reeves has put on people, I think we've been hearing from people this morning saying, yeah, a lot of the businesses I deal with are now actually taking cash when they stopped doing it a few years ago. They now want it because they're obviously easier. It's easier to conceal what you're taking in, so you don't have to pay as much tax on stuff.
Well, yeah, no, certainly wouldn't encourage that, but it's a natural thing. I mean, everybody who's ever dealt with builders, plumbers, electricians, sometimes they say, oh, give me a bit in cash. It's a totally normal thing. But to be fair, this is one area where I think people who are concerned about cash genuinely do have a point when it comes to government regulations or government practices that kind of treat cash as an inherently suspicious thing, an inherently suspicious medium. You're trying to avoid tax, you're selling illicit substances or something. That is certainly a problem. The government should take a neutral approach to this. It shouldn't be preferencing card, bank transfers, cash, gold coins, anything you like. It should be completely neutral as to the medium.
OK. Harrison, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Harrison Griffiths there from the Institute of Economic Affairs, International Programmes Manager. Let's get a voice note from Lisa. Oh, we've already done that. Sorry, my apologies. Blair has finally found a bit of common sense, says Mike. Energy security before energy sustainability. Great show. Keep up the fight for common sense. And one here from Tony in Barrow who says, Mike, Victoria Atkins just said Kemi led the anti-net zero fight back. Sorry, I think Reform were the first to fight net zero. Well, yeah, they probably were. But in terms of the Conservative Party, it is actually Kemi Badenoch who said, that we need to row back on it. She hasn't actually said we're going to do away with it altogether. But at least she's making noises in the right direction. Here's one from Mark, who says, Mike, does this MP forget that the Conservatives, started this net zero drive insanity? We won't forget. Well, it was David Cameron, wasn't he? Do you remember when he talks about going up to the Antarctic, I think it was, or the Arctic, where he got himself on a sleigh with a load of dogs and talked about, protecting the environment. And it was all about hugging people and being nice to people. Law says this, Mike, if my children ever come home from school or somehow require a recorder, I hide them on top of the fridge so they can never be found. Also, as per the parent code, never buy someone's child a musical instrument. Well, that's also very true. Steve says, great show, Mike. Follow up on a story from a few months ago. The Dutch roundabout in Hemel Hempstead. Work is currently suspended on this due to a technical issue, and roads approaching it are still closed for the work. It turns out that articulated lorries can't get around the roundabout, and this is on an industrial scale. What numbskull didn't think it through? Well, there's plenty of numbskulls working in local councils, aren't there? I'm afraid. You can't get away from them. They're literally everywhere. Coming up in the next hour, we've got much more to do and many more people to talk to as well. Esther McVeigh will be here. We'll find out what she used to do with the recorder. This, of course, is Talk, and we'll be back after the news.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls, when you do a poll to find out what people think. Like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls. and I don't like Poles because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh,
so
I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. I don't know where the time goes on this show. We're halfway through it already. Here till 10 o'clock, of course, every single weekday morning. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. Yesterday, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary, so we're now very comfortably into the 2nd year. We've been talking about a great many things, of course, including Tony Blair, the formerly Saint Tony of Blair, has come out as the leader of the Labour movement in this country because he is, in many ways, the godfather to Keir Starmer's godson, as he is now the Prime Minister. Blair it was who created this entire kind of, what you might call blue Labour movement, what you might call the sort of centrist dad movement. He's come out this morning and said in an interview basically that net zero is a pile of tosh, that it will never work, and that in fact it is doomed to fail. Keir Starmer's people are not very happy about this because, of course, they have backed their entire horse on the likelihood that net zero is going to be brilliant for the country, brilliant for our energy security, brilliant for our economy. They're going to create thousands of jobs, they say. They're going to get billions of pounds worth of investment coming into the country. None of that's happened, by the way. And Tony Blair, quite sensibly, has said the game is now up. And according to the I newspaper, he's blown a massive hole in the net zero commitment. The Labour government sources have called it unhelpful and called it a temper tantrum by Tony Blair. But, you've got to listen to the guy because they are the ones that are in hot to him for creating the atmosphere, if you like, and the environment for a Labour government to win an election. Because before him, there were not very many winners in the Labour Party. We've also been talking about recorders. Apparently, fewer and fewer people in school are using recorders, and fewer people are playing recorders. Let's get a voice note from Craig.
Good morning, Mike. This is Craig from Ilkley in Yorkshire. I'm still traumatised by my recorder experience at school. In middle school, the school was so poorly resourced that there weren't enough of those plastic recorders to go around for everybody to have a turn. So I remember distinctly in the middle of the table there was a pot with diluted Dettol in, and we'd had to go on the recorder, dip the mouthpiece into the Dettol and wipe it off and pass it on to the next person. It was rank, rotten and horrible, and I'm still traumatised by it.
That sounds horrific. Imagine that. Yeah, just dip it in the Dettol. That'll be fine. No problem at all. Now they're telling you, whatever you do, don't go outside. You might die. How about this from Jason, who says, happy first day of the 2nd year, Mike. There's a gift shop here in Keswick that sells recorders. The kids walk around town playing them, and it makes my ears bleed. If Starmer and his cronies were a musical instrument, they would be a recorder. I think that's probably right. We've got plenty more to talk about, including, of course, that the people voting tomorrow in the local elections are more likely to actually tick a box that says none of the above. And also Kneecap, that dreadful, ghastly band from Belfast, have actually been banned from a music festival. Next up, hopefully they can get banned from Glastonbury. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. How about this from Christine? She says, morning, Mike. Great show. I shared a bedroom with my sister back in the day. She used to wake up at 6 a.m., no joke, and sit up in bed playing her blasted recorder. It used to cause so many fights. Incredible. A lot of you talking as well. You can't help it, can you, listening to that? Bloody awful. Parents around Britain must be rejoicing that, you know, recorders are not being used very much in school. But a lot of you talking about cash as well, places that take cash. And up in Edinburgh, apparently, according to Colin, Uber are going to start taking cash. As I work for Uber, and even they are starting to take cash, starting from tomorrow here in Edinburgh. Interesting. Let's talk to Esther McVeigh, former Minister for Common Sense. Esther, did you used to play the recorder at any point?
I think we're all psychologically scarred from having to play the recorder, and that was forced upon us by our elders. Actually, I think my trick was just to leave it at home, pretend I'd lost it, or you couldn't actually break it, could you?
No.
It was sort of indestructible. That was another one of its most irritating qualities as well. So yeah, leave it at home.
Yeah, I remember people trying to throw them out in the street so a car would run over them, and they still weren't broken. You know, you'd still have to pick it up and play it again.
Reporters and cockroaches can't get rid of them.
It's true, absolutely right. Bit like Tony Blair, some might say. He keeps popping up all over the place. He's said something sensible this morning, though. Net zero, absolute madness, complete nonsense, doomed to fail. Keir Starmer's not very happy.
Well, I think this is a very significant intervention by Tony Blair. I also think it's very significant, the timing. You know, Labour's going to do very badly in the local election, so this could be a distraction. But let's get this right. The right and people on the right, you and I, always were sceptical and questioned net zero, the cost it imposed upon the people, the fact that we only were 1% of carbon emissions, and the poverty it would inflict upon us. Was it worth it? Would it actually do anything for climate change? No. The left, on the other hand, were always, this was the way forward. This was their new religion. It was hope over reality. This was where they'd march their troops forward and take people on this journey. So Tony Blair coming out about this, whether you like him or not, the guy is a great politician. And he can see a dud when he can see one when it's there, and this net zero is a dud, and he can see the political fallout coming from it. And he knows nobody wants to make them poor, the country poor, when actually we won't have any significant impact. And then you see all of your competition, all the other countries around the world going forward on coal and gas, leading the way and not going on the journey of net zero.
Yeah, exactly right. Because so many lies are told about it. It's a bit like, you know, these politicians, particularly on the Labour side and on the Green side and the Lib Dems as well, they all kind of, you know, issue these platitudes and statements which don't make any sense to anyone. It's a bit like the Emperor's New Clothes for me, you know, where Starmer had his, you know, sort of massive energy security summit last week, you know, which nobody knew was happening until it suddenly happened. And they were making all these noises about, you know, hundreds of thousands of jobs being created, millions of pounds being generated to invest in green energy, and it's all cobblers. You know, there is no money to invest in it. The only money that's being invested is taxpayers' money, which is being funneled into these businesses which don't make any money and don't actually work, in order to make it look like it's a good thing. And there's no jobs that have been created whatsoever. I mean, even Ed Miliband had to admit that despite all of the investment, as they call it, public money being spent on onshore wind and all the rest of it, there's not actually one job that has been generated from it. And in fact, if anything, they're losing jobs because they're shutting everything else down. Grangemouth, I think today, finishes its oil refinery business for the rest of time.
And Tony Blair was pointing these basic facts out to them. The jobs that you were promised from the green economy aren't there. In fact, they're in China, because we'll be buying the solar panels from them. He also, interestingly, talked about the COP events. And he said, actually, these aren't helpful either. And if you remember, at the last one, it was pretty much only Keir Starmer as a world leader who was there. Everybody else shied away from it. Because he said, you've got a format there that you can't actually question it. It has to be you all outbidding each other who's going to be the greenest. But really, what do people want? They want energy security, they want energy affordability and reliability. And what you've seen across Spain and Portugal now, when people are saying, look, was this because we were relying so much on green energy, renewable energy? Is that why you haven't got the resilience? And it's all bubbling up now. We've got the evidence before our very eyes. And I'm just glad that the left are starting to catch up with this and realising it's a disaster. Well, I say that Tony Blair is catching up, but you've got to get rid. And I wrote this yesterday in the paper. Look, Labour's going to have a disastrous local elections. The best thing Starmer could do is sack Ed Miliband first, ditch net zero.
Exactly right. And I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's no question that Blair has still been quite influential when it comes to the Starmer government. You know, Alan Milburn, his former health secretary, has got a key job inside the Department for Health, working with Wes Streeting. You've got Peter Mandelson being the UK ambassador in Washington. You know, there's all sorts of former, shall we say, people like Charlie, what's his face, the QC, the KC Charlie Faulkner. You know, they're all over the place, sort of advising, it seems to me, the Starmer government. So the fact that Labour sources are saying this is a very unhelpful intervention and, you know, it's Tony Blair having a tantrum, do you think it will have an effect on Starmer?
Well, Labour's full of tribes. All parties have different tribes. So there's the Starmer tribe, there's still the Blair tribe, there's the Brown tribe, there's a Corbynista tribe, and there's a trade union tribe.
Yeah.
I don't think Starmer really is a Blairite. I actually think he's very left. Remember all the support he did for the Corbynistas and what have you. But I actually think he's more communist. I think he's more Stalinist. He's very statist. He tells you what he's going to do. You know, we'll tax you and tell you where you should spend your money. So I don't actually think he is that Blairite. But one thing he can't take away from Blair was the success he had as a Labour leader, was the fact that he won election after election. And I think if there's one thing he shares with Blair, or he'd like to emulate from Blair, is to stay in power. I think Starmer is all about staying in power. He will say whatever he needs to say to stay in power. We've seen this as he yo-yos from different policies. And he might, if he thinks he could stay in power with this, let Tony Blair say it. It means he hasn't said it. Somebody else can take the flak, which is something else Starmer does a lot, but he could go down that path.
Yeah.
And as I said, it depends on these local elections.
Absolutely. The Express this morning's got an interesting page one. They've got the story of transgender former Judge Victoria McLeod, who is taking the Supreme Court to the ECHR, believe it or not, the European Court, over the business of whether a trans woman is a woman. If the ECHR come out and rule that actually the Supreme Court got it wrong, Starmer's going to be in a hell of a bad place, isn't he?
Yes, he is. That's why I say he does oscillate from what he believes in, even on those certain facts, biological sex.
Yeah.
Look, I think this is dangerous for the judiciary, isn't it? We've talked about these activists. We've talked about what should be impartial, not actually them having their view and trying to change the law themselves. That's why I liked Robert Jenrick's intervention yesterday to say, who is appointing these judges? How are they appointed? And surely this impartiality should be key. And if they've got a track record of activism, they shouldn't be in that role. And the person who's in charge of these appointments needs to be sacked, he went as far as saying.
Yeah, absolutely right. Because if they do come back, I think he'd have to stand by the Supreme Court in this country, which would put him at loggerheads with the ECHR, which would then put him at loggerheads again with their directives on migration. Because we've learned today that we've gone over 10,000 for the first time, I think, in the history of the illegal boat crossings. And yet, still, the government seems to have no answers as to what to do about it.
Look, I think if this does happen, I think the backlash in this country, I mean, bit by bit, people are saying, look, we need to come out of the European Convention of Human Rights, and we need to come out of the court, and we need to get rid of the Human Rights Act. If this were to happen, I think you'd absolutely turbocharge those calls to come out of the European Convention of Human Rights.
Yeah. As far as the big election coming up on Thursday is concerned, are you worried the Tories are going to get such a tonking that it could do some kind of irreparable harm to the party?
Well, look, I don't think that's the news. We knew we had an absolute booting only about 9 months ago at the general election. We know that, and if I got £1 for every door I knocked on where they all said, you're all the same and none of the above, I'd be a very rich woman. And that's really, in 2024, was the election. The election was about, you're all the same and none of the above. So we know that. And what these local elections are a comparison with is the 2021 local elections. And that was when the Conservative Party was at a high. This was the Boris Johnson election. We got the most seats ever. So we know that at that time, Labour had the lowest seats ever. So they were low. We were incredibly high. Reform didn't exist then. And so what you'll see is Labour go down, tank. We're not going to do that well because we were at an all-time high. And yes, you're going to see reform come up because reform didn't exist before. So yes, you are going to see that swirl. But I do think the story is how much Labour from a low base is going to lose in council elections, in their mayoral elections, in their traditional area, and maybe even that Runcorn Helsby by-election, which is one of Labour's safest seats in the country, like 16th safest seat in the country.
Yeah. I mean, if they lose that to
reform... You can see I'm getting a golden glow, a halo here.
You
this
are.
Is the sun.
You
the
are.
sun powering in from outside.
Yes, it's beautiful. Absolutely lovely. The thing about the by-election, the Runcorn by-election, though, if Reform do win it, that is a pretty seismic change in our political system, isn't it?
Well, this is people saying, look, the Tories got a lot wrong and we voted you out. It's saying, and that was over 14 years. However, Labour have become so unpopular within 9 months, and this is a Labour area. They're saying, oh my, we've given up on you. From the winter fuel to the farmers, to schools, to taxes, you know, we've given up completely on you. Equally, I don't think really people like the Lib Dems after their coalition years. So they're looking for people who haven't really been in power. So it's like, we'll give these a chance. But I think that shows that Reform are a threat in the Labour seats, are a threat in the red wall seats. Yeah. And that's where they'll march forward. But should they win some of these seats, some of these mayoral seats, then they do have to prove they can deliver rather than just talking and throwing stones from the sidelines.
Well, we shall see. Esther, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Keep that glow about you. Esther McVeigh, former Minister for Common Sense, sitting there in the glow of the sunshine. The sunshine, amazing today, as it was yesterday. A lot of people now saying they want the rest of the week off because it's too hot to work. And if you are working from home and you're listening to this, by all means, tell us what you're up to, because a lot of you will just simply be sunbathing in the garden, not really doing any work at all, really. You can tell us. We won't tell anybody else. We'll keep it a secret. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark from Derby here. I'm talking about the illegal immigrants and also the cashless society. Why don't we go cashless? All of these illegal vape shops, barbers, takeaways, people on these electric cycles bombing around the country, earning cash in hand. All of these car washes would not be able to operate, and therefore there would be no draw for the illegal immigrants for them to work in this black economy. All right, have a great day, Mike. Great show. Bye.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, a lot of people say that you know, the only people that really use cash are the dodgy characters, the people who operate on the sidelines of the economy, you know, the people who basically sell drugs or deal drugs or have the Turkish barber sort of, you know, laundry money scenario going on. I've noticed, by the way, and I said this before, that a lot of places, a lot of high streets are now getting dental surgeries, cosmetic dental surgeries, which don't have to be licensed by the NHS and don't have to be licensed to be actually doing proper dental work, but they can launder a lot more money, because obviously people are going to be paying a lot more money to get their teeth done and capped and all the rest of it than you can be paying for a haircut. So they're suddenly, you know, able to launder hundreds of thousands of pounds a month on the basis that they're doing loads and loads of business, £5,000 a time, that kind of thing. You're going in for a haircut, it costs you 35 quid. There's a limit to what you can launder. On the subject of recorders, Michelle says this in Swanage. When I used to play my recorder, my dad asked me if I could play Over the Hills and Far Away. It was only when I was older I realised what he was saying. Thanks for keeping us sane. And here's one from Barbara, who says, I remember in junior school that we returned in the autumn term and someone couldn't get her recorder to play. Teacher unscrewed it and there was a spider in there which had laid its eggs in there. Crikey! She was a school bully, so it couldn't have happened to a nicer person. What a great story. And then finally, one from Treacle in Bridgend. My daughter came out of junior school with a surprise. She jumped in the back of the car and told me, close your eyes. Next thing, she was blowing a new trumpet in my ears. It was hysterical and much better than a recorder, which she started on. She played for several years and became very good. I mean, I'd have to say, as a parent, if your child started playing a trumpet, that would be awful, wouldn't it? playing a trumpet late at night, you know, up in a room. Crikey. Anyway, 21 minutes past 8.
So almost 24 hours without electricity. That's quite something.
24 hours it's took. Exactly. We've used the little blackouts here. They last for an hour maybe, and you normally get some sort of warning coming through, but never that everything has gone.
Well, hold on a minute. You're used to blackouts. So last time I looked, Spain's a first world country. Why do they have blackouts regularly?
But we do. We've lived in Spain for 15 years, and we do get blackouts. It does happen. We are used to it, but not for that length of time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 8:23. Keir Starmer's put out another mad tweet. You know he loves to tweet, doesn't he? 15 minutes ago he says this. This is a message to the fly tippers blighting our towns and villages. For too long, your actions have gone unpunished. And that ends now. We'll use drones and new tech to identify your vehicle. Then we'll crush it. It's a bit violent, isn't it? All right, there, Sir Keir. You get a bit carried away with your own sort of sense of... What do you think you are, Judge Dredd? We will crush your car. I mean, what a plonker. Rodney, let's talk to Lord Goodman. He's here because he's written a piece in The Sun today. Page 10, Quang going down, Quang going down, Quang going down. Very good. It's about the new football watchdog and why it's a threat to the Premier League. And for heaven's sake, if there's anything that doesn't need a new Quango, surely it should be the national game of this country. Lord Paul Goodman, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to read you in The Sun today. It does seem mad, doesn't it, that every time any government official says what we want to do now is get rid of all the Quangos, and suddenly they sort of seem to spring up with even more of them. I think there's 27 more Quangos now since Labour took over in July last year than there were before it.
We've just made a very good point about the Quangos, because when this bill was originally proposed, I'm afraid by a Conservative government, we didn't have Keir Starmer then. But only a few weeks ago, he was telling us we have too many Quangos, too many regulators, and now he's allowed this one to come into existence, which potentially at least threatens the future of the Premier League.
Yes.
And also the place of English teams in international competitions.
Right. And what would be the purpose of a football sort of Quango? They want to call it the Independent Football Regulator. I mean, what's it for?
So, and it was really set up originally, I have to say, under Boris Johnson, for three reasons, but that actually none of them really ever happened. The first was the terrible collapse of Bury Football Club, which was a really bad thing, but I have to point out Bury is now back up and running again. The second was the threat of the so-called Super League. You remember the Super League? It was going to be this closed competition with the top teams in the Premier League. But that didn't happen either because the fans stopped it. And the third reason cited was COVID. Now, COVID, of course, was really bad for football, but I don't know of any club in the top flight, top 5 divisions, closing. So it's a bit of a mystery about why we have to have this in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, the original idea of it, I think, was to sort of try to make sure that people who were not perhaps suitable to own football clubs and to run them shouldn't be allowed access to them. But we've sort of already got regulations in force to stop that from happening anyway, haven't we?
Well, look, I think there was a good case for what we call, when we had to look at this bill in the Lords, Part 4 of the bill, which was the bit that seeks to weed out rogue owners and bad owners. But you now won't be able to play in the top 5 flights without a licence from this state-appointed regulator. And it's going to do all sorts of stuff to do with the finances of the clubs. And when it was going through, Labour backbench peers were getting up and demanding the regulator do more and more. The regulator should do net zero. The regulator should do corporate governance. The regulator should do modern slavery. Now, the government fought all this off, to do them credit, but it will be back. And it's in the nature of these regulators to grow and grow and grow. And I have to say, if fans don't like it when private owners mess up, which they don't, they ain't going to like it either when the government gets it wrong.
No. I tell you, your dog's not very happy, is he? I mean, he's
I'm going to close the window to keep the dog
quiet away in the background. It's always great when you hear from the dogs. It's always good. But yeah, I mean, this is the other thing, that football is such a strange business, isn't it? Because only in football could you afford to pay the players as much as you afford to pay them, and yet many of the actual football clubs don't really make any money at all.
No, exactly. And if you're a lower league club, right, you're in the sort of bottom flight or Part 2, or, League 2 or League 1, what do you get to do when the regulator is putting all these onerous responsibilities on you can't follow? And what will the fans say when the club turns around and says, we want to buy player X or we want to sell player Y, but we can't. Why can't we do it? We can't do it because the regulator won't let us.
Right. That's the problem. And one of the things that we do here, which I suppose is a legitimate complaint, which nobody seems to be doing anything about, is the cost now of actually going to see, particularly the top clubs in the Premier League, how people are being priced out. Ordinary kind of fans are being priced out. I think there was a story from Manchester United the other week where a section of Old Trafford has now been taken over for corporate hospitality, and so ordinary fans who have been going for sort of 30 years, season ticket holders, can't even get seats anymore.
Yes, and that's a big problem. And what will happen when the regulator charges the clubs a fee for its services, which is what it's going to do because the Treasury wasn't going to pay for it, what will the clubs do? There's a danger they will whack up their ticket prices.
Right.
So any fans who are now keen on the regulator, they're not going to be so keen if ticket prices go up.
No, quite. So, I mean, in all likelihood, is this going to be something that we never really see the light of day on?
I think it's going to happen, and I think at first it'll probably all go fine. But it's just in the nature of regulators to accumulate what they seek to do, to put more rules, more red tape, more this, more that. And slowly, the clubs and the fans will feel the consequences.
Yeah. I wonder, though, because, we look at regulators like, for example, the water regulator, the energy regulator, and maybe even the schools regulator, Ofsted. They tend to represent the organisation they're supposed to be regulating more than they do the customer. So I wonder whether it'll all get a bit cosy, and in fact you'll end up with a regulator of football who just wants to get their own free tickets, and they're very, very nice to the clubs.
Well, it's a good point about the free ticket, I suppose. But the point here is that there's actually not a unified view in football, and one of the reasons this regulator's there is the Premier League and the Football League can't agree about the money.
Right.
So the regulator is going to have to make a decision between them. And if he gets it wrong, it does, I'm afraid, threaten the future of the Premier League. I have to add, I've not got a dog in the fight here. I'm a Wycombe Wanderers supporter and I don't follow a top-flight club.
Right.
But the success of the lower clubs does depend on the success of the Premier League because the money flows down. So if government gets it wrong, everyone suffers.
Yeah, quite. And they normally do, don't they? Lord Goodman, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. But Lord Paul Goodman, the Conservative peer, Senior Fellow at Policy Exchange, written a piece in the Sun today, page 10, Quang going down, Quang going down, Quang going down. I mean, there's just too many Quangos, aren't there? Do we really need one for football? I wouldn't have thought so. Let's get a voice note from Karen.
Morning, Mike. We're a small business up in the Highlands on the shores of Loch Ness. We run a cafe and we love accepting cash. It saves us on our overheads, it saves us paying charges to the banks. Unfortunately, the majority of our customers just prefer to tap and do not understand that, especially in rural areas, you get power cuts and then nobody can buy their much wanted coffee.
Yes, I think that's right. Jacqueline in Liverpool says this, Mike, maybe a lot of people use cash not because they are a money laundering, people trafficking drug dealer, as you and other sheeple think, but because they are trying to keep the local high street alive. People moan about it dying and then purchase online with a card. Also, everyone goes on about fraud. Well, you can't fraud the cash in my pocket. Well, you can actually. There is such a thing as fake money. Jacqueline, I didn't say that everybody who uses cash is in any way a money launderer or a drug dealer. I just said that an awful lot of those types of businesses prefer to use cash because it's not traceable. And you don't have to put it into a bank if you don't want to, and you can keep it and use it and trade with it and spend money with cash, and that way nobody even knows you've got it. That's what I'm saying. I mean, if you win money on a horse race, for example, despite the fact that Rachel Reeves now wants to tax that 21% instead of 15%, you win a load of cash, you don't have to declare it. You don't get paid tax on it. And therefore, why would you put it into a bank where you might eventually end up paying some kind of tax? Listen, I'm very much in favour of paying with cash, and I'm very much on the side of people who want to continue to do that. I'm simply saying that an awful lot of people who do only deal in cash are probably up to no good. Great show, says Nefertari. I work from home. My company sold our office block during COVID, so we have no office to go to. Genuinely, I sit at my desk and work 8 to 5 p.m, Monday to Friday, with an hour for lunch. I'm constantly in touch with my teammates, bosses and customers. I work for a security company and we are always very busy. Not all home workers are skivers watching Netflix and sunbathing. I'm not suggesting you all are. Some of you are, though, aren't you? And if you're working for a security company, you can't really work from home, can you? If you're putting security on places, surely you have to go there, don't you? How about this, says Dave. Mike, what about kids getting a £5 in their birthday cards? Car boot sales, village fetes all need the use of cash. Banks don't like cash because it doesn't earn them money, but digital transactions make them millions. Very true. And Alan in Middlesbrough says, I appreciate Blair is speaking common sense, etc., but think you're being a touch naive if you think Blair and Starmer are at odds. This statement from Blair is more engineered than a BMW M8. It's a strategy to save Starmer's neck and bin Ed Miliband. Come on, Mike, where's that cynicism gone? Well, I mean, my cynicism is entirely intact. But I just think that Starmer will not like what Tony Blair has said, because without any shadow of a doubt, he has been completely and utterly on side with the whole net zero nonsense. And he has only just last week been banging on about how it's going to save the planet. So for him to have to U-turn on that because Tony Blair says so makes him look like a lapdog. I don't see any reason why you would think that that is helpful for Keir Starmer. It isn't. Tony Blair is the master of delusion. And yes, you're right. He might be doing it for a reason that we haven't seen yet. But I don't think Starmer wants it, and I don't think Starmer welcomes it, because I don't think Starmer believes that net zero is a crock of nonsense. I think he actually thinks we can save the planet with it. That's what I think. Anyway, 8:34.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:36. I'm Mike Graham, with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. This is the home of common sense. John Brentle has been tweeting about Tony Blair. Of course, he is a big fan of Tony Blair. He was his biographer, and he says, basically, Keir Starmer should have welcomed Tony Blair's contribution and said how much he agreed with it. Yeah, well, he won't, though, will he? And that's the problem, because he doesn't agree with it, because he's in love and he's in thrall to the net zero nutters. He thinks net zero is the answer. And Tony Blair, for all of his faults, has obviously seen through that and realised, actually, this is a good time to say, enough is enough. We can't afford it. It's not going to make any difference to the planet, and it's certainly not going to do anything for our economy other than bankrupt us, because all we're doing is subsidising massive, massive companies which have been set up purely and simply to get government money. That's where we actually are. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Hi Mike, Mark from Manchester. Just a quick one. I heard your news saying that the government are looking at giving people up to 5 years for fly tipping. They can't even put people in jail for paedophilia. So I don't know why they're going to put people away for fly tipping. Country's gone to the dogs.
I know. Totally bad. Yeah. Fly tipping, writing notes on Twitter, 5 years. Apparently Keir Starmer was going around threatening people he's going to crush their cars. What's he doing? What's wrong with him? Crush your car. Keep away from my bloody car, mate. Let's talk to Baroness Claire Fox, Director of the Academy of Ideas. Very sensible woman. I don't know what's going on with Keir Starmer today, but he's not happy that net zero's been kicked out the window by Tony Blair, is he? Morning.
Morning, Mike. Well, of course, it's rare, but I will cheer on Tony Blair in this instance.
Yes, and I think many of us are finding ourselves saying that this morning, but good luck to him. If he can embarrass the hell out of Starmer, then more power to his elbow. Let's talk about adolescence. I don't like talking about adolescence because I think it's an overblown, completely ludicrously over-promoted, drama, which happens to be quite well put together, but which I have not seen, by the way, before you start giving me the Kemi Badenoch treatment. Apparently, however, the producers of the show were sitting in on some committee in Parliament yesterday as if there's some sort of, gift from God. I mean, what is going on?
Yeah, it's very frustrating because this is the Women Equalities Commission and they're having an investigation into misogyny and the manosphere and young men. Right. I mean, that there's a kind of so many boxes to tick in that statement before we start.
Yeah.
But I do think that we in a ludicrous situation where politicians investigating what's happening in the world turn to a dramatist who's made up a fictional story as an expert.
Yeah.
And so you've got Jack Thorne advising them. And I mean, I actually have seen it. I like the drama, but I can't stand the cult of it when it comes to politics.
Yeah,
and yeah, go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say, because, I mean, it's typical of the sort of the world in which we currently live. And Kemi Badenoch made this point when she was getting grilled by the BBC as to, why she hadn't watched it. And they were kind of incredulous, the two presenters on Breakfast, Charlie State being one of them, of course. Well, why haven't you watched it? I'm confused as to why you wouldn't want to watch it. And she's going, well, because it's not real. I actually prefer to concentrate on actual crime, actual statistics and actual problems that we've got, as opposed to made-up ones, which are from a fantasy, fictional, capitulation of something.
Yeah, well, the great line that Kemi Badenoch came out with, which will let me steal it here, was if you're having a committee investigating the problems of the NHS, you don't invite the writers of Casualty on as your experts, right? And it's a perfectly reasonable point. But the other thing is that in the real world, in preference to what's on Netflix last night, we've got a situation where there is actually some pretty grim examples of a real deep-seated hatred of women that are happening as we speak. So in response to the Supreme Court ruling in relation to trans women or not women, there was a series of demonstrations and people waving placards and trans allies and trans activists, and they were explicitly vile about biological women.
Right.
That's if you're going to have a good example of misogyny, and you want to deal with why it is that there's a situation where with impunity, some people can get away with thinking that any woman is just there for their sexual gratification and pleasure, then look at the horrible examples of rapists and paedophiles who are found guilty in the courts, and then we're told they can't be deported. In the instance of that Jamaican guy who they said, even though he raped somebody who was asleep on a bench, I mean, you can't, that is like anti-women. And I don't need to mention to your watchers and listeners the grooming gangs. At the very same time that the women's equality group are having this conversation, they're pretty quiet about one of the real live examples of groups of men preying on and abusing in the most horrendous ways these young girls, as they have been doing with the grooming gangs and the rape gangs. And there's a big row going on about whether we should have a national inquiry or whether they're flexible, local, you can apply for some money inquiries, which is a cop-out and a fudge, should happen. And somehow the more important thing is to discuss adolescence and this idea of everything that any young person sees online, they'll be influenced by. And they're trying to blame that rather than what's happening in material reality.
I know. It's so sort of right on, isn't it?
It's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still waiting to hear from the police, who said that they were looking for 7 of those trans protesters who defaced some statues. Well, never mind them. What about the people who were holding up signs saying "Kill J.K. Rowling" and the only good turf is a dead turf? You know, to me, that makes me think of Lucy Connolly, who's doing 31 months in prison for writing a tweet, which doesn't say anything worse than what they've said, holding a placard up in public, and yet none of them have been arrested.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really gets on my nerves is that they were being held up by biological men. So you want to know where are the men who hate women? Well, they're walking around with big signs saying, look at me, look at me. But the thing that then was interesting was that there were these politicians and trade union leaders and right-on activists who posted pictures of those demos because in solidarity with the trans community, and they didn't even notice that they were posting misogynist signs. In other words, they can't see misogyny when it's staring them in the face. And I think that, by the way, there's nothing wrong with being concerned about lots of young teenage boys, or anyone for that matter, spending far too much time on social media. I can live with all that. You can have a conversation about it. But Jack Thorne, this dramatist, went in and said, oh, well, I'm not saying anything about politics. I'm not saying what Parliament should do. But I'd just like to point you towards Australia, where they're really clamping down. And he then said that the Online Safety Act doesn't go far enough. Well, I'd like to say it goes far too far and is a tool of censorship. So, in fact, he dipped his toe into something he knows nothing about. And if you know, I'm now a politician, but you're not going to ask me to be the main expert when it comes to theatre and drama. And I don't think we should be asking Jack Thorne, because he had a work of imagination that got on the telly, to be the expert on what we should do with online safety. Absolutely not.
No, and this is the thing, the reverence with which it's all being sort of dealt with, you know, where Starmer's invited them into Downing Street, came out and they did a whole slow-mo kind of, you know, oh, here it is. But very good. The guys at this show, I'll tell you what, absolutely top-notch. Here it is. They're walking through, about to go in, and it's almost like shot in the style of adolescence, you know, where it's a sort of one movement of the camera and all that. And they actually went to all that trouble. And then Starmer, of course, said, well, of course, this should be now shown in every school. I don't know whether that's progressed at all. I presume, like everything else he says, it's not going to happen.
It probably isn't, although there's a debate tomorrow on the schools bill in the House of Lords, and I'm going to remind them that when it comes to interfering in the curriculum, that was one of his great insights. You know, we should impose this on every school. By the way, if you do get to see it, you'll realise that it's totally inappropriate to show in every school.
Well, it's a 15, isn't it?
Yeah, and also one of the episodes which features the school shows teachers completely out of control, not able to impose discipline on anyone. And there's also some pretty, I don't know, risque and difficult scenes, which I would not want to show to teenagers. But the other thing was, it was written to show adults and parents what their kids might be doing that they don't know about. In that sense, it was quite insightful, right? There was bits of it that you thought, oh, that's interesting. But it's not shown to show teenagers what they already know, which is that if you go online, you get exposed to the likes of the Tate brothers and so on and so forth, to some horrible porn. So it's completely misplaced. But you said it's like a cult. It's like one of the reasons why I believe that we think that this is influencing is it seems to me that members of the media class in particular have watched this and it's like a revelation from God. They've learned something and they now think this is the truth, as though it's a revealed truth they didn't know anything about. The rest of us actually knew something about this area, even if they didn't. They then assume that if you show it, you can brainwash the kids into watching it because they've got a very peculiar view, which is they think that if you just show something, everyone will just nod along and agree with it.
And also this nonsense that, if you're not watching it, you don't have the zeitgeist of what everybody else is talking about in the country. Really? I mean, is that how shallow we have now become as a society? That, you have to have watched something in order so that everybody can talk about it? Not necessary. I mean, we've managed to spend about 10 minutes talking about it. As I say, I still haven't seen it. I don't need to. Doesn't matter. Baroness Claire, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Claire Fox, Director of the Academy of Ideas. Full of common sense, that woman, I tell you what. Any word from Dale Vince, says Jeff in EC1, since Tony's announcement on net zero? You must be thrilled. Very possibly. I mean, I know that Dale Vince is not in favour of quite a lot of Keir Starmer's policies when it comes to net zero. Gary in Northants says, perhaps this Labour lot played musical instruments previously. Starmer blowing hot air out of a trumpet, Miliband on the clarinet zero, and Reeves on the fiddle. Very good. I like that a lot. But of course, we've got Ed Miliband playing the ukulele. Which apparently is one of the replacement instruments that kids are playing instead of the recorder. Nigel says, morning, Mike. Nigel from Derby. If you give a £50 note to a butcher who then buys from the baker, who then buys from the candlestick maker, it's worth £50 to each of them, and after 50 transactions, it's still worth £50. If you pay by card, the bank takes 1.5% or 3% or even 5%. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker all have to pay the bank for the privilege of transacting, and by 50 transactions, the bank takes the whole £50 in fees. This is the real reason they want a cashless society. Well, you know what? I mean, there's a lot to be said for that tweet, and possibly cash will return in more ways than one, given exactly how much money the banks are taking as part of their little fee scenario. It's 8:48. Coming up, we're going to talk prisons and more stabbings.
In the CAS report, it was found that about 1/3 of children who presented themselves at the Tavistock Gender Clinic had autism or some other neurodivergent condition. So that was there and that was known, but there was an appalling lack of curiosity. Rather than say, is this just an outworking of the child's neurodiverse behaviour, neurodiverse condition, clinicians seem to think, well, it just means they're trans, and move forwards without asking the right questions.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense. It is Morning Glory with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Here's one from Phil, who says, don't forget, while Starmer et al. Are insisting on school kids watching adolescents, Labour in Wales are teaching teenage lads how to strangle safely during sex. The Prime Minister and the government are total clowns. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that on Plank of the Week, actually, last week. Absolutely true. Let's get a new voice note from Paul on cash.
Morning, Mike. It's Paul, currently living in Spain. Had to get out of the UK for, well, obvious reasons. Just a footnote, don't forget businesses. It actually costs businesses to put money into the banks. So the more money they put in, then the more money they're being charged. So card payments will be charged for every transaction. So cash, well, speaks volumes. Great show. Cheers.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are coming to the same conclusion that because of all the fees that banks are now charging, it's an awful lot cheaper if you don't actually use the banks for absolutely everything, and you do actually use your own cash for your own devices. And sometimes, if you're running a business, cash is going to be king. Let's talk to Vanessa Frake, though, former prison governor. There's a couple of stories have come across the desk this morning about some more problems in the prison system. Robert Jenrick wrote about this a while ago, about how Muslim gangs seem to have overtaken an awful lot of the prison systems in the country. And not only are they sort of, ruling by violence, but they're also kind of converting an awful lot of people, willingly or otherwise, into the Muslim faith. We now, of course, have had the incident in the prison up in the north of England, where the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber threw some boiling butter over the prison guards and stabbed a couple of them as well. And apparently now the people in the prison service are fearing that there will be more attacks like that, particularly from Islamist fundamentalists. Let's find out what Vanessa knows. Vanessa, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. This is a real problem, isn't it? Because it seems to have sort of come up on the rails without people really noticing it or talking about it. I mean, until this attack from Hashem Abedi that happened over the last month or so up in Franklin, I think, in County Durham, I didn't know there was a problem with Muslim gangs in prison, but it seems like there really is.
Well, I think the MOJ has kind of kept the lid on this as much as it could. For obvious reasons. Yeah. Look, I think we need to face this fact. Yeah. My concern is that we have several high security jails that we are in risk, very high risk of losing. Only the other day there was a fight between two opposite gangs at Franklin's that staff had to intervene. Yeah. Again, without stab vests or any protection. And it's becoming an issue, and unless the MOJ get a grip of this and actually face up to the issue. Look, I'm not saying that there's only Muslim gangs in jails. Yeah. There are many types of different gangs, right. Postcode, football, whatever, but these are prevalent. They are causing disruption to the good order and discipline of prisons, and the MOJ seriously needs to do something about it.
Yes, and when you say some of the prison officers don't have stab vests, is that an issue of money? Is that just because they're not issued with them as a general principle, or what?
Well, the last time the Prison Officers Association asked for stab vests for staff, which was a couple of years ago, they were told by the Ministry of Justice that it would make staff look too intimidating. Oh, yeah. Take of that as you will. But I think, we live in a violent society. Right. And
guess what? The people in the prison are probably being put there because they're violent.
Absolutely. And, I think... we need to look after our staff. They do a very difficult job in very difficult circumstances. Overcrowding doesn't help. Shortages of staff doesn't help. And I think we really need to get a grip of our prison system and go back to basics and stop appeasing prisoners, stop trying to appease various outside bodies, and literally get a hold of our prisons again, because we are in danger of losing them.
Yeah, quite. And was there a time when you were involved with prisons and governing them, etc.? Was it better then? Was it more? Were you more able to be sort of, more draconian, I suppose, in the way you treated the prisoners?
Well, I don't think it's draconian to have discipline, to have regimes that are strict, to have prisoners know the line. I don't think that's draconian. I just think that serves for good order and discipline. And also, you know, when you have a well-run, disciplined prison, prisoners prefer it because they feel safe.
Yeah.
And there's an awful lot of prisoners that don't feel safe in jails at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And so, I mean, what needs to be done? I mean, you said, for example, right at the start of this, you know, they've tried to keep a lid on this problem with Muslim gangs for obvious reasons. I mean, obvious reasons obviously being we don't want to rock the boat, we don't want to make out that we're racist, we don't want to be accused of anything that we're not guilty of. You know, all of those nonsensical reasons for not telling the truth. Surely that's all got to go now.
Well, I think you need to look at, you know, one thing isn't going to solve this. You know, I think my own personal thoughts are that we need to go back to something like a supermax jail where, you know, leaders of gangs are taken out, they're put in segregation. Because at the moment, what we're doing is we're segregating those that are in fear of these gangs. And that can't be right, to keep people who are scared segregated. It should be the other way around, surely. You don't reward the bully, you know, you look after the victim.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think we seriously need to get a grip of it. I think I would like to see much more discipline in it. There's no point in just having like a supermax jail and stick them all in, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket. But certainly you can look at your intelligence system should be telling you who are the main ringleaders, who are the ones that are causing the issue, and split them up around the high security estate. You know, we live in a violent society, and a mirror, you know, a prison is a mirror of that society. Violence is much more prevalent in prisons now. You know, the assaults on prisoner and prisoner on staff has gone up incredibly over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, and we need to look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Vanessa, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Vanessa Frake, former prison governor, saying that basically the prisons are out of control. They need to be sorted out. Have we got time for a quick voice note from Becky?
It's Becky here from West Yorkshire, loving your show as always. Here's one for you. That recorder that I remember years and years ago, I had the bottom of it taped with some sellotape. Me and my friends, we won the National Eisteddfod mic with our recorders, and we ended up on TV. How about that? Great show as always.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Well done. Winning in the Eisteddfod. Fantastic work. Well done, Becky, on the recorder. Most people can't play them, of course, and they sound absolutely bloody dreadful. We'll be talking about that coming up in the next hour. Also, Katie Perry is here, PR specialist, former Downing Street advisor, of course, to Theresa May. This is Morning Glory. Back after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say.
If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour.
Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner. But don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 3 minutes past 9. It is the day upon us, of course, Wednesday, 30th of April. Last day of April, I guess, if anybody's interested. It's going to be May tomorrow. Big election day, of course, coming up. We'll be covering all that as it happens, of course, as the results start to come in on Friday morning. We'll be here bringing you all the shocks, all the stunning results that may or may not happen. Some people think there might be quite a low turnout because an awful lot of people are so fed up with politics they don't even want to vote. We shall see. But the Sun have got Nigel Farage very much in the driving seat when it comes to popularity. He's leading the polls with 26% for reform, leading both the Tories and the Labour Party. The Mail have got another poll in which it says none of the above will be the real winner because an awful lot of people just don't want to have any politicians doing anything for them. We've got Katie Perrier coming up, former Downing Street advisor. We'll find out what she makes of it all. Also, the big story this morning is, of course, that net zero, according to Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister and the former Labour leader, is doomed to fail. Front page of the Times, front page of the Telegraph, he's basically saying, forget about it, Starmer, this is not going to help. You're asking people to make financial sacrifices and changes in their lifestyle, which will effectively have hardly any effect, minimal effect, on global emissions and on saving the planet. So that has rather set the cat amongst the pigeons in the Labour government, because apparently they're saying it's unhelpful, to say the least, and a very unhelpful and unusual intervention from Tony Blair, who's thrown a temper tantrum, that's what they say. Also, we've been talking about recorders an awful lot this morning as well, because everybody used to have one. If you've got children, somebody used to play one. Apparently nowadays, hardly anybody's playing recorders in schools, and nobody really knows why. Apparently they're playing ukuleles and guitars instead. So we're asking everyone if they can give us a good version of a recording of a recorder. Please do send it in. You can text it to 87222. You can call us on 0344 499 1000 and leave us a voice note. Let's get one from Dean on cashless society.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always, mate. With regards to cash, we have to hold on to it. Can you imagine someone like Starmer being in charge of your bank and he can turn it on and off whenever he likes? You've seen recently in Portugal and France and Spain with a power outage. If that's gone and you can't get to your money, you can't pay for anything, nothing moves. We've got to keep cash. Cash is king. We lose all control as humans if we can't walk around and pay for stuff off our own back.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Dean. I think it's a very bad idea to try and go to cashless only, because more and more of you are telling me that actually cash is really, really useful, and it's really, really good to use it if you can spend it in shops, if you can spend it in restaurants, if you can spend it in bars. Very much so. I was quite surprised, actually, when I had a bunch of cash recently, and I could spend it. I kept expecting people to say, no, we won't take any cash, but they kind of do now. It's 5 minutes past 9. This is Morning Glory. got an awful lot of you getting in touch about all manner of things, including, of course, adolescence, because we were just talking to Baroness Claire Fox about it. This one comes in from somebody who I think gives a name at the top. Yeah, Lorraine. I watched the series and the thought of the writers being involved in law is frightening. There is nothing more than a fictional woke story. The series skirted around real issues. We know, and facts prove this, that the biggest perpetrators of knife crime are young black males, and the majority of victims are also young black boys. We also know that knife crime is also more prolific in single-parent households without a male role model. Rather than highlighting reality, they chose to use a white child from a white nuclear family. If we are to tackle such terrible destruction of lives, we must face the truth and put in place schemes to help the right people. But this is the trouble. It's the sort of infantilisation of politics, the infantilisation of the way that the country is run. Oh, let's get some producers in from a fictional TV show so they can teach us about what is actually really happening out there on the streets, because we don't know. It's hopeless, isn't it? Let's talk to Katie Perrier, British Public Relations Specialist, it says here, and former Director of Communications in Downing Street. Katie, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, you look like somebody that used to play the recorder at school, did you?
I was a goody two-shoes at school, yes. And I also used to learn how to write on a typewriter, or type on a typewriter.
Oh, right.
And later I gave my niece a typewriter and she said, I haven't got a clue what that is or how to use it.
Right. Brilliant.
These things are dying out.
It's like something from a museum, isn't it? People don't even understand it. When I first started writing in Fleet Street, we all had typewriters, and the noise in the newsroom was brilliant. Now, of course, you just hear these little tip, 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 tap, 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 tap. It's not the same at all. Anyway, over in the land of Sir Tony of Blair, things are going well. I mean, I think he's been secretly listening to this show because I've been banging on about net zero for years, saying that it's not any good, it's a waste of everybody's money, it's never going to work, and even if it did work, you don't actually get any benefit for the planet. So he's said something sensible.
He's clearly your biggest fan, Mike.
He is.
Tony Blair has a real point here, and I think it's something that the Starmer government is waking up to. Whether or not that makes them feel that they're being pressurised more into doing the right thing around net zero, or whether or not that's putting them more in a corner. But what we're seeing in the last few weeks is an acceptance that, especially in what's been going on in the last few days in Spain and elsewhere, that you have to have an easier transition, maybe a longer transition into a net zero without losing massive jobs in Scotland, without turning off the taps in terms of fossil fuels. It is madness to be importing energy from abroad where you're susceptible to their prices, their wars and everything else that's going on, when we have those resources here. Now, over time, there is a role to play for wind, for hydrogen, for carbon capture and other things. But why do we have to be world leaders in this? Why do we have to be first to the race? Because as Tony Blair said, that's not necessarily going to be having a massive impact on the environment and the end result and the outcomes. So what's really worrying people is the large amount of costs that continue to be added to energy bills, whilst we have got resources in this country, and yet we're thinking about turning those off, making people redundant and shipping in energy from abroad, oil, gas, wherever it might be.
It doesn't make any sense.
And I think Tony Blair is kind of leading the way on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what's interesting is how much of what Tony Blair says is going to be adopted, if you like, because even though, you know, he's technically no longer in charge of the Labour Party, he still has quite a bit of influence, doesn't he? I mean, he managed to get Mandelson into the job in Washington as British ambassador to the USA. He's got Alan Milburn into the Department of Health and Social Security, or Social Care, as it's now called. You know, there are several kind of, you know, point men, if you like. Even Jackie Smith in the House of Lords, you know, people from the Blair administration, even Miliband, I suppose you could say, who are still hanging around.
Well, very much so. And I do think Tony Blair and his organisation, Tony Blair Institute, is very influential within government. There were some rumours not that long ago that Angela Rayner was going to walk from government. She was very cross on a number of different fronts, and that Tony Blair had intervened and tried to persuade her to stay successfully. So I still think he's very much part of that outfit. Whether or not this came as a surprise to the Number 10 operation, or they knew about it, or indeed they thought it's probably a good idea because they started to see the light on some of these things. I also think it's slightly mad to be pump priming lots and lots of energy projects through Great British Energy if the market will pay for itself. And where I sit in Westminster, the energy market is going great guns. There's lots of investment in renewables, lots of investment in wind and hydrogen and others. And so I'm not sure it's a great use of taxpayers' money to be pump priming some of these things. The market will already do it. We should be focusing on how we're really going to change people's lives and diverting the money that way.
Well, I agree with you, but it's interesting what you say. We'll come back to that. Let's have just a quick look at what he said, Starmer, earlier this month on net zero.
there's a global race on for the jobs of the future in relation to net zero. More investment is coming into this country in relation to renewables than any other sector. I don't think now is the time to step away from that race. Now is the time to double down on that race. Some country is going to win the race when it comes to renewables and the changes for net zero. I want Britain to be in that race, and I want us to win that race.
See, I think he's got it slightly wrong there, because like you said, Katie, there are companies that are investing in renewables. There are companies that are making money out of it. And my worry about GB Energy is that it's simply a vehicle for taxpayers' money to be funneled through to give some jobs to the boys that perhaps are very, very happy to be given the free money.
I just need to be really persuaded of every project that they spend their money on, that that's going to be giving taxpayers return on investment, but also that it's doing something the market wouldn't do already. I agree with Keir Starmer. We are swimming in interest from energy companies from across the world, wanting to come to the UK, wanting to invest here, wanting to see our skill sets merge into other careers, because we do have fabulous people in the oil and gas sector, and we should have jobs for them for life if they want them, but we should also have opportunities for them to go into renewable industry if the market's there and they want to move over to other sectors too. They call that a skills passport in the sector. I'm very supportive of that, but what I don't want is one or the other. Right. And I don't really need to be first in the race. No. I want to make sure that when people are coming to Britain, they have, if they want to invest in the country, we've got the right regulation, we've got the right, not too much red tape, not too much bureaucracy. We get those projects rolled out, we get those jobs and those training and skills going. Do we need to do that at the expense of making other people redundant or turning off the taps elsewhere? The answer to me is no.
No, exactly right. And so much of what Keir Starmer does at the moment is sort of performative. He's issued a tweet this morning about crushing cars, because it's now, today's the big day for saying he's going to cramp down on fly tipping. Not coincidental that, in fact, tomorrow is the big local election day. No doubt he'll say something about potholes before the end of the day. But he's talking about crushing cars like he's sort of Judge Dredd. It's like, stop making out that you're, the master of the universe and just get something done that you said you were going to do.
I think these local elections will show that real apathy, so turnout may be low, but also that they really want to vote for none of the above. And that's a real worry. That's a real worry for democracy. It's a worry for the fact that people don't see the benefit of having politicians in Westminster and local leaders in combined authorities as mayors and leading councils. That's a loss of confidence. It's almost like the contract between members of the public and the politicians that oversee how they spend their money is broken. And that's a real challenge. If there was any lesson to be learnt from Trump, and you can agree with him or disagree with him on a number of fronts, but there was some lessons to be learnt in terms of what you stand for and what you're going to do in office and how you can quickly move to do that. I think that the last 100 days of the Labour government, they will look back and probably regret the speed at which they took to some of the decisions they wanted to make, some of the decisions themselves around fuel payments to pensioners, cutting welfare benefits, things like that. Some of those decisions they think may not have worked for them and their voter base. So they're struggling to work out where their voter is in the future. Yes. Is it Tories that were disaffected? Well, they don't look like they want to vote for Labour right now. Is it some of the Reform Party that they think that maybe Farage might be going too far? So there needs to be a reset, a political reset, I think, which is so they really understand what they are and who they stand for and who they appeal to, because there's many more years left in this government. And if the lessons from Trump is anything, be bold, make some strong decisions, and so that people really understand what you're about.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm glad you mentioned Trump, because I've got a couple of really good clips. I'm going to play one of them here. This is him talking to ABC, one of what he would call the fake news media, about Joe Biden and how they all treated him.
Do you think the reputation of the United States has gone down under your presidency? No, I think it's gone way up, and I think we're a respected country again. We were laughed at all over the world. We had a president that couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, couldn't walk down a flight of stairs, couldn't walk across the stage without falling. We had a president that was grossly incompetent. You knew it, I knew it, and everybody knew it, but you guys didn't want to write it because you're fake news. All right. Thank you. And by the way, ABC is one of the worst. I have to be honest with you.
And I love the way the ABC guy goes, thank you. You're fake news. One of the worst. He's right, though, isn't he? Because everybody knew Biden was in a bad way, but nobody would report it. And anyone that asked a question to your colleague, I suppose you would call her, the White House press secretary at that time, was sort of laughed out of court and said, well, how dare you? What are you, some kind of maniac? Of course he's fine. Even Keir Starmer went and visited him and came back and said, oh, yeah, Joe Biden's on top of his game. Absolute madness.
Well, certainly Trump is punchy. His press secretary, who's not even 30 yet, I don't think.
Caroline Leavitt, yeah, she's brilliant, isn't she?
She's one of the punchiest people I've seen in this line of work. And certainly there are occasions where I think to myself, God, I would have liked to have had those opportunities to say a few things to the British media in the past in our role. We don't have televised press briefings in the UK like they do in America. So unfortunately, I didn't get that opportunity, Mike. Otherwise, I would have had some fun with that, I'm sure. But look, we don't always agree with Trump on everything. I think that some of his decisions recently are going to be damaging to world trade, to the money that's in people's pockets, what they can afford to buy, the price of things that may well go up as a result of some of his decisions. We don't know yet. It's too early to say, and we shouldn't presume. But what you can actually say is an incredible communicator.
Yeah.
He says it like it is. He won't be he won't be media trained into a certain phraseology or a certain position or loads of fluff and pad. So you really haven't got a clue what this politician's about. I think we are seeing a new age of say it straight, be authentic, and you either like it or you don't. Vote me in office or you vote me out of office. You decide. But less of the fluff, please. I think that's where.
I mean, we saw it with the whole, what is a woman debate. It was the word, it was the question that every politician feared being asked when they would come on Julia's show, they'd come on my show, and you would say, can you define a woman? And they suddenly get all shifty and they start sweating. And, and I was saying this earlier to Theo Usherwood, who was in doing the papers with me this morning. If you ask a politician, what day is it today, more than likely they'll say, look, I've been very clear about this. I know exactly what day it is, and I've always known what day it is. And from tomorrow, I'll be declaring the days as they go. And then you go, yeah, but what day actually is it? And that's what you get. And people are sick to death of that.
Well, there's been a whole industry in the last few years made out of telling politicians you can't say this and you can't say that. And also there's a fear factor. There's a fear factor on I can't offend anyone.
Yeah.
Well, you never really succeed in politics if you can't be straight with people and you can't be clear about what your leadership's going to offer. And so over the years, and I think more recently, what we're seeing is the fact that people are turning their backs on that kind of behaviour you just talked about, and they want authentic politicians.
Yes.
And you need to work out where your kind of mandate is, or where your biggest vote base is, and you have to accept that some people won't like you, and that's fine. And what we've done in the last few years, and we've had politicians who have been kind of a bit meh. I don't know how to describe that, but a bit nothingy in some regard. It's because they're just too fearful for taking a side or don't want to offend anyone. And I think past that, I think we have to say, you agree with me or you don't. I'm not all things to all people, but I'm really, really passionate about making this country better. And here are my ideas for doing so. And it's a democracy. You vote accordingly as you see sense. So more of that, please, and less of the fudge.
Absolutely right. And speaking of that, I'm going to finish with a little Miliband sign-off. And here he is playing the ukulele, although it turns out it's not actually a ukulele.
So my friend is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. So here I am, on the latest stage of my GB Energy Tour.
Yes, that may come to an end sooner rather than later. Stuart in Perthshire says, Mike, you do realise that Ed Miliband is not playing a ukulele, and it's actually a half-sized child's guitar. Just thought I'd point it out, as everyone seems to think it's a ukulele. Whatever it is, I mean, those kind of stunts should go the way of all flesh, shouldn't they?
It looks like half the strings are falling off that machine, that instrument, whatever it might be, whether it's a guitar or a ukulele.
Right. Well,
and I spent many years listening to my youngest son play the ukulele at school, because it does replace the recorder in some of those music lessons. And it's head on earth. I don't know what's worse, the recorder or the ukulele, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Ed Miliband loves these stunts and these videos, and it's a bit kind of Ed Davey-like as well.
Yeah.
I think they're incredibly cringy. I can't bear them. But at the same time, we're talking about it on radio, and so there's some cut through there, I suppose, that maybe other politicians might not have. And he's trying to bring attention to the fact that he's a massive supporter of the wind industry.
Yes. But if the only reason people know you as a politician, and we have to remember that an awful lot of people don't really know politicians, they don't recognise even who Keir Starmer is if they showed a picture of him. Is it as a PR person, would you say it's better to be known for being a wally than it is not to be known?
No.
I
would
think.
my time and my effort and my energy making sure that I was a statesman and that I was leading the way in some of the areas that I felt passionate about, and I was a little bit more serious.
Yeah, and of course you are. We must have lunch again soon, Katie. Good to see you. Katie Perry, former Director of Communications in Downing Street, of course, under Theresa May. I don't know what else we can do to cheer you up today, but I've got this very, very nice message that came in just now from Paul. He says, kindest regards, this is the first time I've messaged Talk Radio, and I would like to say what a fantastic listen. I've never heard so many topics that the general public are so concerned about, and a radio station that has the balls to chat about live on TV and radio. Keep up the fantastic work. Listen, very kind of you, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. We'll do our best. Coming up, we're going to speak to Esther Kraku. This is Talk.
Tony Blair is now listening to and agreeing with Reform UK policy, as are an increasing number of people, about the madness of net stupid zero. And let's just remind ourselves, I mean, we've seen huge blackouts across southern Europe, in Spain and Portugal, and it may well be that that's triggered Tony Blair to say what he's just said. But people should be under no illusion, and there's a sort of conspiracy of silence. Oh my gosh, what happened? And no one wants to admit the truth, which is that it's net zero.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 24 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10, and about another half an hour to go. I remember back in my primary school days, says Trev in Boston, playing the recorder, and I forgot to take it in for lessons one day and was given a spare one at the school. The problem was the mouthpiece tasted like it had been stuck up someone's nose. Truly disgusting. I made sure I never forget. Well, goodness me. Yeah, we've been talking about recorders all morning, really. Esther Kraku's here. Let's find out if she used to play one. Esther, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Did you ever have a recorder at school?
I did. I think, though, at some point my mother must have thrown it in the bin because it just mysteriously went missing. And I was like, Mom, where is my fantastic musical instrument? Which never appeared ever again.
No. I think she was probably doing everybody a favour, because there's nothing worse than somebody who can't play the recorder. It's absolutely the worst thing. Apparently they're disappearing from schools. But let's talk about trains this morning, though, because an amazing story from Avanti West Coast, who have apparently asked digital artist Baraka Carberry to do a painting on a train, and I'm going to show the painting now, which looks absolutely and utterly ridiculous. It looks like something from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band period of the 1960s. Together We Roll. I mean, have you seen this?
Yeah, I have seen it. You see, these things, they don't inherently bother me, but when we factor in the fact that train fares have gone up by 45% in the last 10 years, or the fact that most trains are never on time, or the fact that, you know, they are just like filthy and people have no respect for noise pollution or anything like that, I just think, don't you have other priorities to sort out than celebrating the diversity of your workforce?
Yeah. Well, you could say that they certainly have. For example, most of the time, if you get on a train on the Vanti West Coast, you can't get a seat because there's not enough spaces, right? Also, I happen to know that because my son was supposed to go back to Manchester over the Easter holidays, and over Easter weekend, on the Easter Monday, there were no Avanti trains running at all. It was a replacement bus service. No trains on Sunday, no trains on Saturday. So it doesn't really matter how much they paint the train if it's not bloody well moving anywhere.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think a few years ago there was this row over, you know, the potential for driverless trains. I think at this point most people are thinking, yeah, if actually that's going to get these trains working on time and reduce my fares so I don't, like, it's not cheaper for me to fly from Spain into the UK, I think I'm all for it. I think people's patience with the train lines, given train fares and all the other shenanigans, have just worn out.
Yeah.
We just have no more tolerance.
And, of course, the trouble is that, you know, you've got people who really think these things are important. Avanti West Coast Customer Experience Director, how about that for a title? Catherine O'Brien said, nothing like this has been seen on the UK's railways. What does she mean, like a train? Absolutely. Yeah. We're incredibly proud of this unique train and who it represents. And for those who are listening and not watching this, it represents, obviously, immigrants. That's the thing. And the whole train is covered in pictures of people with, you know, tabla drums, people from Muslim countries wearing coverings over their head. They've got sort of rainbow flags everywhere. It really is quite bizarre.
I almost think it's like sort of a fetish.
Yeah.
Like they fetishize sort of non-white Europeans, which is strange to me because you would expect to see white Europeans in a northern European country. Anyway, but it's bizarre because I think, what are you trying to achieve with this? Not because it's offensive, but it's like, don't you have other priorities?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's not, you know, it's like you say, on the face of it, it's not something that you particularly don't like, but it's just the way that they push it. I mean, we've got Rail Minister Lord Hendy saying, diversity is key to the success of any industry, and creative work like this goes a long way in sparking conversations, encouraging inclusion, and may inspire more people to choose a career in railways. I don't think that's true. I think it's really actually quite pathetic and a little bit condescending to assume that, you know, because somebody comes to Britain from a different country, they're only going to think about working on a train if there's a picture of somebody that looks a bit like them on the train.
Well, exactly, and I don't think people's reluctance to join the rail force is because there's lack of diversity. I think it's because the pay is rubbish and trains are never on time.
Well, it's not that bad if you're a train driver. They don't 15% thanks to the Labour government. True. You know, there is that. But yeah, I just find it to be totally and utterly ludicrous. Let me just play you a voice note that we've got here from Linda, who's talking about something we discovered on the show today.
Hi, Mike. It wasn't that long ago that Christian nurses were being disciplined and sacked in the NHS for offering to pray with patients or with the patient's family. So how come it's now okay for Islam to be pushed on everybody once they step inside the NHS? Thanks very much. Bye.
This is a story, Esther, that we discovered this morning from somebody who sent it in to us, that there's something called the NHS Muslim Network, which apparently has been given public money inside of the NHS as an organisation to convince people to convert to Islam.
Yeah, that's completely inappropriate. And this is not specific to Islam. I don't care what religion it is. It's highly inappropriate. I think the NHS has other priorities, like, I don't know, healthcare.
Well, you would think, again, just do what it says on the tin, right? If you go in for an operation, it'd be really helpful if you didn't have to wait for about 4 days before you could get it.
Exactly. And I think, more broadly speaking, people's perception that there's almost a cultural favoritism of one cultural religion over the other, it really rings true. I mean, for some reason, you have Keir Starmer and the King bending over backwards to wish every religious minority and every ethnic group a happy holiday for every single calendar holiday they can find in the year. but they would forget, like the head of the Church of England would forget about Ash Wednesday or Mother's Day, for example, in favour of remembering Eid or all of these. And it's not that people are inherently offended by wishing people happy holidays or whatever, but you lose the essence of what this country is. I mean, do the Emiratis bend over backwards to wish the Hindus and the Christians happy? I mean, it's not necessary, and I think they're sending a different message by doing that.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous. Absolutely right. Esther, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Esther Kreku there with her take on a couple of the stories that we're looking at this morning. The ridiculous train, multicoloured and beautiful. The whole train is going to be painted like this, right? Which looks completely and utterly bonkers. One from Gary here. He says, Sir Keir has moved on from smash the gangs, now it's smash the vans. What's he going to do to the fly timbers who use rented ones? And how's he going to trace those who use fake plates? Just another here today, gone tomorrow policy designed to catch the attention of voters ahead of the local elections and at least try to create the illusion of activity at number 10. Absolutely right. On the subject of cash versus cashless, I was watching some news clips from Spain yesterday, says Lewis, and when interviewing people on the street, the common complaints and concerns were that people weren't able to return home by bus or taxi or buy what they needed because they didn't have cash on them. Cash is king. A simple general power outage shows how vulnerable we are on a cashless society. It is utterly irresponsible moving us into a cashless society, even more irresponsible accepting for it to happen. And one final one here from Sarah Jane, who says, 2 of my cousins are twin boys. When they were about 12 months old, I kept threatening to buy them each a drum. I felt it very important to harness any musical talents at an early age. Nobody else in the family agreed. Very ungrateful, says Sarah in Plymouth. P.S. My aunt convinced them that all ice cream vans in St Helens were really for social workers who wanted to take children away. An inspired idea. Absolutely right. Well, you know, there's nothing worse when you're a parent than you've got somebody who comes into the family home and says, I brought a present for your little boy or little girl. Here it is. It's a drum. And you go, oh, great. Thanks very much indeed. But no thanks. 9:32.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
My goodness me, doesn't that bring back some horrible memories for you? I told my son to practice his recorder in the shed so his brothers wouldn't distract him, says Amanda in Kent. I am so going to hell. Well done. My neighbour, says George from Luton, was knocking on my door at 2 a.m. Luckily, my son was able to answer it as he was still up practicing his bagpipes. Yeah, very good. I mean, if you ever heard somebody playing the recorder, and you'll never forget it, Mark in Selby says, how about replacing the recorder with a vuvuzela? Do you remember those? That was, of course, the noise that you heard from the South African World Cup, which I think, I'm right in saying, was about 2010. Could it have been that long ago? I think it was. I remember talkSPORT going down there, and it was absolutely horrific. You know, there was that kind of buzzing noise. Zzz, you would hear it in the background of every football commentary. Ridiculous. Joanne, now, on recorders.
Morning, Mike. Joanne from Norfolk. So, yes, we had recorders at school. I did actually play a recorder. But when I went to secondary school, I traded up to a melodica, which is effectively a small, type piano. It has keys and much more organ-like when you played it rather than the recorder. And my favourite tune was Molly Malone, and I used to play that day in, day out, and drive my parents absolutely bonkers. Great show. Thanks, Mike.
I remember melodicas. I had one as well. It was green. It was sort of horrible, like lime green colour with the keys were black and white, like a piano. It was really strange. I'm not sure if I should say this, but you used to play it. If you played it for long enough, it would sort of fill up with saliva. It was horrible. And then it would sort of drip back out at you when you were doing it. And I'm sorry about that. This one from people, Wayne says, Mike, stop that recorder track. It gives me PTSD. I've got 3 young kids. I'm waiting for that question of, Dad, can I play the recorder? No! Should we play it and have another balanced energy? I'm sorry to keep you waiting, Caroline. We've just been getting very self-indulgent about recorders. You ever play a recorder?
I used to play the flute.
Oh, the
actually.
flute? Oh, a proper musician.
Which was, no, well, probably just as painful
badly.
for my parents.
Yeah, absolutely right. Obviously, everybody's talking about what happened in Spain and Portugal over the last couple of days, and the big question: how would Britain cope? I mean, we've been talking about, funnily enough, how people have been sort of focusing on cashless societies because of it, because an awful lot of people couldn't do anything. They couldn't catch a cab. They couldn't pay for anything. They couldn't get money out of the ATMs. Suddenly you realise that actually cash is maybe quite a good thing to have with you. How resilient do you think we are in this kind of situation?
I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, what we've seen in Spain and Portugal has been awful, not just the kind of, people not able to charge their phones or move about, but, also the effect on kind of emergency services. Yeah. So I'm glad the power is, starting to recover. The UK is it's in quite an interesting position, I have to say. Our grid is a little bit different from Spain and Portugal. Right. And actually, the kind of organisation that's responsible for keeping the lights on is doing some really interesting work at the minute, particularly how you can use things like, for example, batteries, EVs, etc., to actually keep the lights on in this type of situation.
Right. I guess it depends on how long it goes on for, really, doesn't it? Because the resilience of the system depends upon how quickly it can be back up and running again. And one of the criticisms that was made of the Spanish system was that it wasn't as kind of reliant as it used to be on old-fashioned sort of fossil fuels, and that made it more difficult to restart the whole thing.
Well, I think there's two things, really. I think we don't know, right, what happened in Spain and Portugal properly yet. It seems to be a coincidence of things that came together that were difficult to manage. Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is we've taken lots of steps, actually, in this country to try and get ourselves to a point where that actually wouldn't happen here. And a big part of that is actually something called flexibility. So that's the way in which actually, for example, if you had solar and batteries in your house, or if you had an EV, you can actually use that to make the grid much more able to withstand the sort of shock that we saw in Spain and Portugal. If we were to get to this type of situation that Spain and Portugal have experienced, we're also doing quite a lot actually around how you would build the grid back up. There's been lots of lessons. There's still lots of lessons to be learned, from the experience we had. Do you remember when Storm Arwen happened? And lots of the north of this country was out for quite a long time, actually.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a shocker because that was quite a few days that people were without power. Yes. We've learned quite a bit from that experience, I think, and also from one in about 2019. Where do you remember? We had a sort of regional blackout in the southeast, but the problem was that the trains couldn't get themselves back up. Yes. Which kind of added to. And so,
why was it that it took so long in that Storm Arwen one? Why did it take so long? Because I got the impression it was just that they were almost going sort of house to house and fixing telegraph poles and stuff like that. I mean, was that the problem?
I think there was enormous disruption to the power lines, as you say, in that circumstance. But this is the kind of thing we need to think about, right? It's weather is going to be more extreme going forward, and our ability to adapt to that with our electricity systems is really important. But I think we are getting there. I think the really big thing is how do we invest now in things like, for example, batteries and other things, so that we can actually keep the lights on whilst also helping homes and businesses to keep their electricity bills low.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the things I was asked about as well is why can we not devise a system, and I know nobody has, but I wonder whether somebody could devise a system for better storage as well of some of the generated power, which kind of goes nowhere. You know, if you...
Exactly. Well, no, you make a really, really good point. So we're doing a lot of stuff on that at the minute, actually. So you can see that battery storage in this country is increasing very significantly. We actually have one of the best markets in Europe for battery storage in this country. We also have this amazing thing that we're starting to do, which is that you can make a battery look a bit like an old gas or coal plant, right. Because it has a sort of ability to absorb shocks. And more than that, the government has just put in place things for very long duration energy storage, whether we do that through very large batteries, we do that through hydrogen, for example. So there's actually, the UK is really quite innovative in some of these areas about how you truly keep the lights on in a way that works going forward.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because unfortunately I remember the 70s when I'm sure you're not old enough to remember them, but we had 1 hour of electricity in the morning to have breakfast, 1 hour of electricity in the evening to have dinner, and the rest of the time we didn't have any electricity at all. It was during the whole kind of 3-day week time when power stations were out.
Which just shows you fossil fuel systems are also liable to their own...
Well, no, that was just because there was a strike, and so they switched everything off, and they just weren't actually generating anything. That was the problem. But, you know, we hopefully won't go back to that. Good to talk to you, Caroline Bragg. Thank you very much indeed. Energy expert, CEO of the Association of Decentralised Energy. We've got not very much more time to go. We'll take a couple of calls. I've got lots and lots of voice notes and things to play as well. Is that a new one, Vivian? Yeah, let's have Vivian on recorders.
Oh, morning, Mike. Talking about recorders, I just wanted to tell you about a really funny incident that happened between my two children. My daughter was learning to play the recorder, and she went into the playroom one day unannounced, and there was her brother standing there with her recorder, scratching his backside with it. She was horrified. Needless to say, that went in the bin. Great show. Thanks, Burke.
Vivian.
Have a good day.
Goodness me. That's an image, isn't it? Crikey. Janice from Perth says, as an ex-recorder player, I doubt we'd be allowed to play 3 blind mice anymore. Would it be called 3 sight-limited mice by the Wokerati? Yeah, well, it probably would be. What is it they refer to? Visually impaired or something now? 3 visually impaired mice. Doesn't really have a good ring to it, does it? 9:44.
Well, the tariffs coming down is going to get U.S. products, particularly agricultural products, into other countries that have been keeping us out. And you are seeing, billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of manufacturing being announced, expanded manufacturing in the U.S., companies coming back to the U.S. And we just saw that Apple is going to move their manufacturing from China to India to avoid the tariffs.
Yeah.
So,
How's that working out for
time.
American workers? So they're going to get they're not going to get a job whether it's in India or China, are they?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Jules in London says, listening to a badly played recorder is still less painful than listening to Starmer. That's true. Ex-music teacher here, says Debs, my whole learning of music started on a recorder and this led to a 20-year career. Well done. And Vinny in Rochdale says, I once learned bar on the recorder. I say bar because that's how far I got before having the recorder ripped out of my hands and snapped over my dad's knee and thrown over his shoulder before he went back to reading his paper. Yeah, those were the days. You weren't be seen and not heard. One from John, who says this, a bagman of Hook. He says, great show. Recorders are alive and well in Morris dancing bands. My wife is our foreman of music, plays a recorder and keeps a secret weapon in her bra, a Garkline recorder, which is tiny but really loud for when there's a lot of noise. And don't forget, Morris dancers around the country will be dancing at dawn tomorrow as it's May Day. You are welcome to join us at 5:32 a.m. Well, remember that, actually. We actually kick off at 6. So unless you're actually going to be Morris dancing outside the building, there's no chance of me actually being there. But I will certainly say a big hello to Morris dancers, all dancing at 5:32 a.m. Tomorrow morning. And Pam says, Mike, a retrograde step stopping music in schools, especially the basic recorder. I did not learn a musical instrument, but all my family have. Probably there would be less mental problems if there was more music in people's lives. It's a good point, actually. I mean, there are lots of good reasons to get your kids to play a musical instrument, and if you can get them to do it, it might be something that leads them into a career, might be something that leads them into just some really interesting places. You can play music everywhere, you can go on school tours and all of that. You could have a great time. Let's get a voice note from John on working from home.
Morning, Mike. John from Derbyshire. Fantastic show as ever. Unfortunately, I've got a bad lower back and a bad neck, so I've not gone in the office today. I think it's been caused by carrying this diabolical Labour government's tax liabilities on my shoulders. So hopefully I'll take some tablets and they'll go away.
Yeah, you might well be lucky enough to have that happen, but unfortunately the burden, I think, the tax burden in particular, is going to get heavier and heavier and heavier, John. So take the rest of the week off. And I'll see you on Monday. Although probably not, because it's bank holiday, isn't it? Earlier on today, on the show, we spoke to Baroness Claire Fox about the producers of that fictional drama, Adolescents, who were attending a Parliament committee session yesterday.
It's very frustrating because this is the Women Equalities Commission, and they're having an investigation into misogyny and the manosphere and young men. Right. I mean, that there's a kind of so many boxes to tick in that statement before we start.
Yeah.
But I do think that we, in a ludicrous situation where politicians investigating what's happening in the world turn to a dramatist who's made up a fictional story as an expert.
Yeah.
And so you've got Jack Thorne advising them. And I mean, I actually have seen it. I like the drama, but I can't stand the cult of it when it comes to politics.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say, because, I mean, it's typical of the sort of the world in which we currently live. And Kerry Badenoch made this point when she was getting grilled by the BBC as to, why she hadn't watched it. And they were kind of incredulous, the two presenters on Breakfast, Charlie State being one of them, of course. Well, why haven't you watched it? I'm confused as to why you wouldn't want to watch it. And she's going, well, because it's not real. I actually prefer to concentrate on actual crime, actual statistics, and actual problems that we've got, as opposed to made-up ones, which are from a fantasy, fictional, capitulation of something.
Yeah, well, the great line that Kemi Badenoch came out with, which let me steal it here, was if you're having a committee investigating the problems of the NHS, you don't invite the writers of Casualty on as your experts, right? Yeah, and it's a perfectly reasonable point. But the other thing is that in the real world, in preference to what's on Netflix last night, we've got a situation where there is actually some pretty grim examples of a real deep-seated hatred of women that are happening as we speak. So in response to the Supreme Court ruling in relation to trans women are not women, there was a series of demonstrations and people waving placards and trans allies and trans activists, and they were explicitly vile about biological women.
Right.
That's, if you're going to have a good example of misogyny, and you want to deal with why it is that there's a situation where, with impunity, some people can get away with thinking that any woman is just there for their sexual gratification and pleasure, then look at the horrible examples of rapists and paedophiles who are found guilty in the courts, and then we're told they can't be deported in the instance of that Jamaican guy who they said, even though he raped somebody who was asleep on a bench. I mean, you can't, that is like anti-women.
Yeah.
And I don't need to mention to your watchers and listeners the grooming gangs.
Yeah.
At the very same time that the women's equality group are having this conversation, they're pretty quiet about one of the real live examples of groups of men preying on and abusing in the most horrendous ways these young girls, as they have been doing with the grooming gangs and the rape gangs. And there's a big row going on about whether we should have a national inquiry or whether they're flexible, local, you can apply for some money inquiries, which is a cop-out and a fudge, should happen. And somehow the more important thing is to discuss adolescence and this idea of everything that any young person sees online, they'll be influenced by. And they're trying to blame that rather than what's happening in material reality.
Yeah, once again, the infantilization of reality, as Baroness Claire Fox told us there. You know, the idea that somehow these producers of fictional drama are being invited in to a parliamentary select committee to give their view of what's happening out there in the real world tells you all you need to know about the people who live inside the parliamentary estate, who have no clue about what's going on in the real world. This from Frances in Llanelli. She says, absolutely loves the show. Morning, Mike. Can't believe they're doing away with the recorder. I've lost count of the number of times I've got myself out of a tense situation with a few bars of Frere Jacques. I remember that one. Hi, Mike. It's Rich from Dudley. My everlasting memory of playing the recorder at school was that the mouthpiece stunk, as no one ever cleaned them. Whee! And Trev from Boston. I used to play recorder in primary school, and also the treble, which is a larger version of the recorder. I gave it up due to it taking up too much of my time on lessons. Crikey. Well, I mean, you can play all manner of things. We've actually got, and you might remember this, we played it a bit earlier in the show, some footage of King Charles playing a vegetable. That was King Charles playing a carrot, actually, with apparently the Vegetable Orchestra of Great Britain or something like that. People can't be sure, really, by the way, whether he's playing Bar Bar Black Sheep or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Apparently it's the same tune. On the musical front, we've also got this from Ashley. She sent us a message about her son, Austin, and his favourite music to dance to. Check this out.
You dancing, matey? Oh no, your music's gone off.
On DAB Plus, on your smart speaker, TV, and on your side.
You dancing?
Talk.
Absolutely brilliant. Little Austin, absolutely brilliant. You're always good to convert them young to the sound of common sense, and that, of course, he was dancing, of course, for those of you who don't know, to the music that we play in between the ad breaks, which is very. A lot of people find it very sort of therapeutic. Funnily enough, Penny in Cornwall says this: when I was at primary school, my youngest sister played the small descant recorder, the middle sister played the slightly bigger treble recorder, and I played the bigger steel tenor recorder. Goodness me, which I had to balance on my knee when I played it because the bottom section kept falling off otherwise. How extraordinary. And Sarah in Belfast says, in my son's school they play the tin whistle instead of the recorder. It's common enough here in Northern Ireland. I used a recorder to help him practice. Recorders are great and underappreciated. They have a great dynamic range compared to other school musical instruments. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's hard to believe that schools have done away with them, but according to a piece of the Times this morning, basically pupils are leaving them in their droves. Apparently, according to this story, the use of recorders has almost halved in the last decade. It's gone down from 28% in 2014 to 16% today. And instead, schools are using the ukulele, which I'm sure is probably even more annoying, isn't it? How about this from Patrick? Mike, some Nottingham buses have painted in the side that all are welcome to ride, whatever their pronouns. And in the main square, patronising banners for Ramadan, etc. If I wanted to be preached at, I'll go to church, because that's part of the deal, says Patrick in Nottingham. And Fred says, Mike, the diversity trains, where are the white people on the painting slogans? What a waste of money. Well, you'd like to think that actually they'd be better off making sure the trains actually run somewhere as opposed to not run somewhere. As I said, over Easter, Avanti West Coast wasn't running any trains at all. You could get a replacement bus service to Glasgow. Can you imagine? Oh, dear. Julie Hartley-Brooks here.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Hey?
I see these things. My anger at these things is now visual. I used to just roll my eyes and go, oh, well, it is. A, it costs a load of money.
Yeah.
B, you've got senior people at these companies spending time dealing with it. I mean, they'll be old. I mean, they'll have consultants.
Oh, yeah.
There'll be huge amounts of money. You know, I mean, I'd rather they gave the staff a pay rise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. No one cares about this stuff. Also, do you like Nigeria and India and everything? Do they have diversity trains with a load of white people on?
Well, you can't really see the
just
trains.
shut up. No one cares.
There's people hanging off the top of them usually,
Also,
so you can't tell whether they're painted or not.
were people of minority ethnic groups or religious backgrounds or people who think they're trans, were they all sitting there going, oh, I don't know if I can get the train, I don't know if I'm welcome? Was that a big issue?
Yeah.
Is there polling showing that?
Also, I've never heard of anyone who comes to a country and goes, I'm not getting on that train unless there's a picture of someone who looks a bit like me on it.
No, it's all white sodding lefty liberals, isn't it? They're just about anyway.
Madness.
Talking of whom?
Right. Talking of whom? Tony Blair. Welcome.
Amazingly, Tony Blair's in the news. Tony Blair reckons net zero is doomed to fail and irrational. However, he actually still believes in the climate change net zero stuff. It's just not how we're doing it. This is the first time I've ever had a story about Tony Blair in the last 10 years, I think, that doesn't involve him saying that the solution is ID card.
Yes. Well,
I'm reading everything.
You're waiting to see
what point does he mention ID card as the solution? He says AI, he wants tech solutions, but at what point will it be ID cards?
Yeah, fascinating. We've been talking as well a lot about the cashless society thing. There's a lot of people saying in Spain, you know, everything went down. Yeah. Nobody who hadn't enough cash, you couldn't do anything.
I remember, during lockdown, my kid was 14, had to get her a bank account so she could buy stuff, to buy a pint of milk or something. Yeah, I'm really concerned about this, and especially after what happened in Canada.